Wow, I can't believe America has been around for 2024 years. Gaming in the current year is my annual wrap up to go over all the games I played within the calendar year. That might sound like a lot. Actually, it is this year. But there are some exceptions. If I have already made a video about it, it won't go here because, duh. Games are not specifically going to be games released in the current year because who the hell has time to play new releases? And I'm going to omit any fighting games unless it's a new release I really want to talk about. So, one of the games I played this year has to be the GOTY 2024. Let's frickin' get into it, dog. And damn, it's gonna be a chonker. You saw the runtime, baby. I played a lot of video games this year. Fucked up little man. You're so fucked up. And wait a second. The protagonist in this game is actually named. Okay, we gotta find another joke. Can it? This one's not gonna work. I've never played a FromSoft first-person dungeon crawler, so of course I started with the weird cousin release. Unlike Kingsfield, Shadow Tower, or even Echo Knight, Eternal Ring is a standalone release that was never expanded upon. This time around, the gimmick is all about magic. Stamina bar? Nah, magic cooldown bar. This ain't Dark Souls, kiddo. Anyways, Eternal Ring has an elaborate system for making magic rings. This isn't the type of game to give you a bunch of weapons or equipment. The rings are the main focus here. You have 5 spell rings, rings that actually cast a thing in the game, and then 5 attribute rings, rings that are like passive buffs, so to speak. The actual creation of these rings is where shit gets a little wild. Next to most save points is a portal to this magic dude. Here you can combine up to 6 magic gems, of which there are 6 elements and multiple levels of power, to create a ring. Creating an attribute ring just requires any 6 gems, but creating a spell ring requires a proper noun, ring of magic, for the gems to be grafted onto. If you don't have any spare rings of magic, you can also take an existing spell ring and just rewrite over it with a new spell as well. Now, unless you're like me and have a physical of this game with the manual, the art of ring creation is going to feel like an alien language. Basically, for spell rings, what you put on the left 3 slots will determine the elements at play, and what you put on the right 3 slots will determine if it's an offensive or support spell. And the combined level of all gems used will determine what tier of spell it is. There's nothing in the game that explains this, and even with that knowledge, ring creation feels like arcane guesswork. Which is kinda cool! There's something so mysterious about trying to create rings that it works out for me. Magic gems are common drops on every enemy in the game, so by the time you see a save point with a teleporter, you feel like a mad scientist just trying to make shit via experimentation. Because this ring creation is such a load-bearing aspect on the game, it drastically shifts the item economy towards it. As mentioned, you are constantly picking up gems from dispatched baddies, but also anytime you see a treasure chest, it's like an 80% chance that you're getting a ring of magic. Which is dope because that's a new experiment you get to craft with. But if you come to From games for finding all sorts of new gear or items, well, that sense of discovery has been shifted to ring creation instead. The ring creation system is by no means the only part of this game that is arcane and obtuse. Unlike other From first-person crawlers, Eternal Ring seems quite linear. There were only a couple times where I could think of a branching path I saw, and there isn't really a way to backtrack to explore what you missed. In fact, there's a couple story moments where I am displaced into a new area with no means of going back, which feels deeply at odds with the type of exploration and interconnectedness people look for in these games. There is also this confounding day-night cycle because the game is tracking how many days you have been on this island. This is easily one of the most banana-ass mechanics I've encountered because it will change the lighting in the area. This is not restricted to outdoor zones. I had to go through the river of lava during nighttime, and even in the depths of this fucking cavern, the night cycle made everything darker. It's one of the most insane things I've ever played. I had to use lava and ceilings and certain walls to try and figure out where I was going because it was so dark I could barely see. There is no mapping function or lighting effects for this game either. You aren't getting any help with this shit. I don't have a clue about what this changes or even if it has any significant effect on the game, but stumbling through a cave in turbo darkness is something buck wild I doubt I will ever forget. This game wasn't exactly good. Once you get outside the magic system, the rest of the game feels very flat. With this being a PS2 launch title for both Japan and America, a lot of the graphical advancements feel very dated to the rest of the platform. Especially in these dungeons with impressive texture mapping that end up repeating themselves into becoming confusing and nondescript. Combat is mostly fine because of the magic system, but on occasion it feels chunky and poorly relaying back to the player if they're really doing all that effectively. Like, sometimes it feels akin to guesswork trying to understand if your magic is doing normal damage, less damage because the enemy has resistance to it, or more damage because it is the enemy's weakness. It's not like this game plays like shit, but it does play like there's a bit more of a stank on it than you would prefer. Eternal Ring has that certain aura to it. I don't want to say charm because that feels a little too positive, and I don't want to say vibe because that's a descriptor that's been played out and bordering on meaningless, but I think aura is just neutral enough to describe why someone would play Eternal Ring. It lacks the curious exploration, the memorable encounters, the engaging bosses, honestly a fair amount of things you would want to see from a FromSoft game, but it still has that cryptic feeling that From games love to play in. If you have been deep in the trenches with a lot of other FromSoft releases in this caliber, I think it's more than likely you walk away from Eternal Ring much, much cooler. But for someone like me, this felt like an acceptable way to enter this side of their catalog. Yume Miru Kusuri might be the most eroge-ass eroge for me. Like, if there was a default eroge, an eroge.exe if you will, the platonic ideal of an eroge, it's Yume Miru Kusuri. It's beautiful to look at, sensational to hear, but sometimes you want it to shut up. It isn't embarrassing until it becomes embarrassing in the most regretful manners possible. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's so good that it reminds you why this genre is so effective. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's so bad that it reminds you why this genre is divisive. Yume Miru Kusuri gives you everything, whether you like it or not. YMK's biggest attribute is the presentation. Jesus Christ almighty, do I love the way this game looks and sounds. Outside of this one model that looks like Ayaka's eyes are going in separate directions, and Mizuki's model that looks like her breasts are no longer on speaking terms with each other to the point where you could drive a truck through them.
You've been hit by, you've been struck by, struck.
The character designs, art style, menu presentation, and bells and whistles are just sensational. The game is so buttery smooth and easy on the eyes. Paired with this is a close to all-timer soundtrack. The songs in YMK are not just good, they are load-bearing. They take the material and bump it up a whole letter grade with their inclusion. There are a couple of songs that kind of crash into the scene a little harder than they should, but in general, the music in this game is fucking fantastic. I'm not joking, the two versions of the default theme are stone cold 10 out of 10 pieces of art. Listen to this shit. When you spend the evening alone with Mizuki in the student council room with this song draped over your shoulders like a thin sheet, you feel it. You can easily lose yourself in the setting because it feels so real, so tactile, so calm. As oxymoronic as it sounds, there is this almost aggressive sense of relaxation. Its sister song, Orange Twilight So Close, performs the same magic trick a second time. impossible to hear this melody and not feel the tension in your shoulders ease up. This is what you play visual novels for. The writing is brought into a new world by being paired with extremely good voice acting, beautiful artwork, and a song that takes you out of your seat and transplants you into the world of the game. There are times during Yume Miru Kusuri that I am absolutely whisked away, able to live in the fantasy of another world because the game's presentation has such a powerful grip. And then I am yanked right out of that immersion because the game is showing me Kohei's little sister bare-ass naked or being a level of homophobic that could only pass in a game released in 2005. Man, I'm not fucking joking. For every moment I think I am playing something wonderful, there is a moment I think, nay, I fucking know, I am playing something that is dog shit. Kohei's coworker Hirofumi is gay, and every time he's on screen, you can tell the game is biting its tongue hard enough to cause bleeding, trying not to call him a slur. It wants to call him a slur so badly you don't even understand. It throws around some other slurs that were regrettably much more acceptable in the 2000s, but man, when it comes to Hirofumi, the game's face is red and sweating trying not to say it. I'm not even gonna touch the naked little sister stuff, like what the fuck, man, come on. It's such a black mark on the game, because when it doesn't have its head up its own ass or is doing the worst anime bullshit around, YMK can be great. Each of the 3 routes have a central theme you deal with. Media literacy be damned, it's right on the cover. You can't fucking miss this one, there's no excuse. How well it handles those themes may be up for interpretation. These 2 aren't handled very well, but it's at least trying. And that's probably how I would describe Yume Miru Kusuri. It's trying. Of the 3 routes, both Ayeka's and Nekoko's route feel like they are on the cusp of maybe having something salient worth saying regarding their topics. But when the story has to climax and the shoes have to start dropping, it can't really muster any sort of message bigger than drugs are bad, okay, and bullying is bad, okay. Jesus Christ, how old is that reference? Both of these routes feel very flat because they don't weave very well. Sometimes they are interesting, but then an H scene happens because this is an arrow game and it's been 15 minutes, and it just reads as, oh shit man, we gotta write this in here somehow. And I don't mean to sound like some Gen Z unnecessary sex scene complainer, but the game will go from plot or character moment to Nekoko's butthole without much of a care to relate the two. They don't have the grace or direction or competence to warp an entire story without going into cuckoo crazy territory. And by going into cuckoo crazy territory, I don't feel like anything of worth was really said, despite how close it feels like they might have been. Ayeka's route ends without any real satisfactory rumination of bullying, and Nekoko's route has to find a way to circle the square on a story of drug use that is just too fantastical to have any real touch to it. They both try, but they both have a moment towards the end where it feels like they have to give up and just kinda go bonkers to write themselves into the ending. Which all of this is so curious compared to Mizuki's route, because her route is awesome. Time spent with Mizuki grants you a look into a character that has wrinkles to her. There is a tension to your interactions because you don't know where the power play ends and where the sincerity begins. I think it's a well done look at someone who is complicated and troubled, someone who acts destructively and does so with the sense that she can get away with it. Even her H scenes feel like they feed into the whole of her character instead of just being genre-mandated arrow content. There's even one scene that might be among the best things I've read in a VN. Spoilers for Mizuki's route, skip to this timecode if you don't want to hear them. There is a part of Mizuki's route where an abrupt time skip happens and you find yourself in a very different place. While Kohei, and by extension the player, attempts to figure out if what they are going through is real or a dream, there is this palpable tension because either option feels possible. When it's revealed that this isn't a dream and that Mizuki kinda straight up drugged and kidnapped you, the displaced feeling doesn't go away, instead turning the idea of if you are dreaming into a very real nightmare. It's some of the most effective writing I've seen in a while because it happens so instantly and you are backfilling your understanding of what's going on while also dealing with a situation that is becoming more and more intense. It feels like the more you are trying to ground yourself, the more you are losing control of where you are and what's going on. Whereas the other routes have the moment where they kind of jump the shark, this insane ramp up feels earned because Mizuki has spent the entire route building up to doing something this dangerous and impulsive. it's moments like this that make me glad I read this. Also, while I have you in spoiler territory, let's briefly touch on the elephant in the room. Yes, the climax of Ayeka's route is completely fucking insane. It's outrageous and exploitative and completely over the top, and I'm certain it's the big thing people remember from this game because how in God's name could you not? It's not good, but I kinda respect the writers for just going buck wild because they don't think they had any other choice given where their story was going. Really, the route does tip its hand pretty early when Ayeka, in very literal and serious terms, tells you to go out with her or she's gonna jump off the school roof. And much like how the game doesn't really have anything to say on bullying, the game doesn't really have anything to say about just how emotionally abusive Ayeka can be at times. So, like, you get some hints this is heading to a trashy slop fest of a route. To wrap up what I said in the beginning, Yume Miru Kusuri feels like a litmus test. It asks if you can handle some of the dumbest fuck shit you've ever seen to experience a showcase on what the genre is capable on delivering. Maybe I don't have enough of the genre under my belt to fully claim that, but that's how my takeaway feels. I'm glad I played it because the times where it sings are stronger to me than the times it falls screaming from the sky. But at least it's sometimes funny to watch it tumble. I've had this on my shelf for a good couple years because holy shit, I never knew a sequel to Legend of Legaia was even made. The fact that I never heard anything about a follow-up to one of the big cult classic JRPGs on the PS1 made by someone not named Square or Enix, kinda also set my expectations on the low end, if I'm being honest. Legend of Legaia is a game that still gets brought up with a lot of reverence, and I played it both when I was very young and like 7 odd years ago, so I can say that it still holds up. It's not just some nostalgia pick. Legend of Legaia was good enough for me to make sure I played it to completion. And I'm happy to report that my expectations were set erroneously, because Legaia 2 is just as good as Legaia 1, if not better. Now, Legaia 1 is famous for its unique, almost fighting game-esque combat system, where you punch in different directional inputs to unlock special moves. With enough moves and inputs, you can start chaining combos together to do big damage, assuming you have the meter to spend on it. This is the big fucking thing the game is remembered for, and with good reason, because I think the other parts of that game fall down a bit. Don't get it twisted, I think Legaia 1 is very good, but I'm not sure I would push it into great. The story spends a lot of time being rather basic. Shit, the whole first act is one of the most by-the-numbers fantasy adventures possible. The pace of play is just a little too slow between overworld movement and waiting for enemies to scuttle up to you, and it takes a staggering amount of time for your third party member, Gala, to feel like he's actually able to pull his weight. But don't take my word for it, take the word of 2017 Jay, because I found all my tweets being mad as hell about how dog shit Gala is. But to reiterate, these are just things that stop Legaia 1 from being an all-timer and just leave it in the category of a very good PS1 JRPG that I would recommend playing. And what fucks me up about Legaia 2 is that it improves on so many parts of the first game. The biggest is the rework of the battle system. It still has the directional input system of 1, but it has been refined to be much more engaging. In the original, all forms of arts would take AP meter, and outside of normal play, the way you pump your AP up is to spend a turn charging your spirit commands. In Legaia 2, now your normal arts actually give you AP, and only your more powerful arts cost AP to use. While this does remove the input bar increase Legaia 1's spirit charge gave you, Legaia 2 is overall much more generous with upgrading your input bar over level ups. Instead of Legaia 1's pace of spirit charge, big combo, spirit charge, big combo, you are now constantly comboing off, but in different ways, depending on if you are trying to build or spend AP. The fucking special sauce about how both games operate is that you can link specials by comboing with overlapping inputs. This makes the game so much fucking fun as you are trying to find the best combo lines, be it either squeezing in as many normal arts as possible to crank your AP up, cashing out as many big moves as possible, or specialty shit like starting your combo with a hyper art, which cannot be linked into but can be linked out of, and then piling on normal arts afterwards to recoup your AP costs. Enemies are not exactly punching bags on this. Some enemies will either float or be too small or whatnot, where certain characters' inputs will whiff, meaning you need to readjust your combo lines to still get good connections. Throw in new arts like the expensive team-up variable arts into the mix, and you have a combat system that is some of the best in class. And if this sounds like it would make the game a slog to play through with it taking so much time, Legaia 2 tries its best to offset that. First off, the speed of battles is much faster, but the contents of them are also just better. I don't know if I would call the game difficult as much as I would say challenging. Even your rank and file random battles require a certain level of thinking because every enemy both hits harder than you would like and status effects can instantly fuck up an encounter. Even in fights that you pretty handily win, you will have to heal up afterwards because going into the next one down in health could send your ass to the game over screen. I think I was at the 16-hour mark before I hit a dungeon I could mostly take encounters without much of a care, but that was with some good equipment and cooking buffs. Oh yeah, fucking cooking! For some reason, Legaia 2 decided to stack a bunch of additional mechanics on the game. At campfires, you can make a variety of meals that give party stat buffs for a certain amount of battles. Also at campfires or town stores, you can upgrade equipment into new gear if you have the right crafting items for it. The biggest addition is accessories and skills. There's so many different skill adjusters for things like negation or resistance of status effects, which in this game feels so worthwhile, siphoning your own HP to buff your attacks, giving you an extra input after guarding, buffing the amount of damage your arts do, recovering MP after battles, stealing items during attacks, increasing the amount of items you get after a battle, like so much fucking shit, and most of these come from accessories. So now there's a weight system. Yes, another mechanic! And after you equip all your regular gear, you can use the rest of your allotted weight to put on as many accessories as possible, which is where the majority of these really good skills come from, and accessories will level up to unlock more skills. There's also a little gardening thing I didn't even grab footage of because I knew I wasn't going to interact with it, but like, damn, they were just putting a shitload of things into this game. All of which makes it sing louder than Legaia 1 ever could from the gameplay side of things. There are a couple of steps backward, however. Instead of beating Seru in Legaia 1 to take them on as castable spells, a system that itself wasn't perfect, but it was at least very exciting when you saw another Seru you could capture, characters in Legaia 2 have their own JoJo-like stand called an Origin. These Origin will learn spells as they level up, like in almost any normal JRPG, and if I'm being honest, it's kinda fucking flat. The good news is that their spells are very expensive and powerful, so outside of Maya's healing, these are game changers when they come down. But the amount of spells they'll learn and how fast they learn them makes this system feel like an afterthought for everyone other than Maya. But if there is one unavoidable complaint, it's something you have been watching this whole time. This game looks like penis. Legaia 1 was, on the whole, a pretty good looking game, especially for something that came out between Final Fantasy 7 and 8. Legaia 2, on the other hand, was just not sure how to use the newfangled PlayStation 2 as well as its contemporaries. And when I say contemporaries, I mean this game came out 5 months after Final Fantasy X in Japan and over 10 months in America. That alone maybe explains why I've never heard of this game, because FFX just ate its fucking lunch and left nothing but a pile of bones. Legaia 2 usually moves well outside of some junky running animations. All the attacks and emotions are done more than well enough, but it's really just that the modeling looks so penisy. Like, what the fuck were they trying with Maya? I get that there was an attempt to do the big eyes, big forehead thing to create that baby-like cuteness, but it didn't work, dude. But graphics aren't the only thing penisy about this game.
Here I go!
Ray of pain. Frost, arise.
We can't afford to lose. Try this one on for size.
Oh, fuck, man. This is some voice acting. There are some performances and lines that go down in the Bad Voice Acting Hall of Fame. Not everyone is bad, nor is everyone a bad voice actor, but I'm guessing the directing was nearly non-existent. Main character Lang is voiced by Cam Clark, a voice actor with a history of works nearly a mile long behind him, and here he is sounding fucking awful. Lines are frequently said too fast or otherwise delivered with a tone that doesn't match up very well. And again, this guy isn't some newbie off the streets, so I'm assuming the powers directing him were just totally out to lunch. But as far as complaints go, those two are the only ones. And if I'm being honest with you, penis-y graphics and voice acting can really only dock the game a point or so in the grand scheme, especially when you put it up next to all the cool shit it does, like Maya. The first 2 hours of Legaia 2 are honestly a huge slog and kind of boring, but then you meet your second character, Maya, a mute girl who can cast healing magic but cannot attack. She becomes your dedicated item user and healer because she can't do anything else, and it stays like this for a good long while. It's not until the 8-hour mark where Maya finally gains her voice back and starts performing offense, but she does so in a way totally unique to the rest of the cast. Maya doesn't have a martial art or weapon skill. She's a magician, so her inputs are all elemental-based spells. Her arts also don't work like other characters. She cannot link arts together because everything is just casted magic. This is so fucking cool because the game really takes the time to give you Maya at her most useless and work with it and have interesting battles where it's just two people and only one of them can attack. And then when she finally becomes a full-fledged party member, she does so in a way that is totally different to anyone else in the series. That shit's so fucking cool, man! And that's the power of Legaia 2. It's a game that isn't a pillar of its genre like its contemporaries, but it's a game that's constantly doing something cool. After that 16-hour point I mentioned where I had my first dungeon I steamrolled, the game retooled itself to be challenging again. That's cool. The game has so many little mechanics and side quests that you could spend more time engaging with if you are enjoying your time with the game. That's cool. The game has fucking Yasunori Masuda as one of the composers on the soundtrack. That's really fucking cool. Legaia 2, from a distance, is a game that looks very unassuming and maybe a little rough around the edges. But man, when you sit down with this game and it really locks in, holy shit, this was great. I know I'm selling it a bit hard. It's still like a 7 or 8 out of 10 JRPG, but Legaia 2 is without a doubt one of the hidden JRPG gems out there. If you liked Legaia 1 and can handle what the game is trying to do for the first act, you are rewarded with a truly special time that rewards you for giving it a shot. I have nothing for this. Ciel's route is maybe the most boring thing I've ever read. This took the whole year to read. I had to force myself to finish this in the last quarter because of how long I was putting off reading this route in service of doing literally anything else. I'm not being hyperbolic. It put me to sleep multiple times when I was reading in bed. So much of this route is either A, the general plotting seen in Ark's route, which isn't a fucking barn burner to begin with, or B, fucking just the most sawdust chewing conversations between Ciel and Shiki. It is impossible to imagine the human that stayed engaged during almost any of this. I've never been so bored by the written word before. The problem is that it isn't bad, it's just uninteresting. Ark's route was filled with many parts that were bad or objectionable, and that makes for a significantly more engaging time. Ciel's route can barely muster anything worth remembering. I wish it was worse, because then I would have something to come on here and talk about. I don't want to admit it, but Shiki being a negging, woman-hating domestic abuser is vastly more interesting personality than whatever the fuckload of nothing happened here. And Shiki isn't the only one at fault. Ciel has no personality. Negative personality, if you will. You couldn't pick up her swag on a scanner. I know there's this meme out there of Ciel and Curry, and after playing this round, I think I see why that cropped up. The closest thing to a characteristic Ciel has going for her other than generic love interest is that her favorite food is curry. It is the only interest or attribute or flavor the character has outside of her narrative arc, which isn't particularly interesting itself. So what you are left with is a boring route featuring boring characters and a boring prose that fails to paint the world with any interest because the can of slop it's charging its brush with is premium grade mold resistant interior-exterior paint and primer boring. And then it has the gall to be almost interesting. Spoilers and content warnings for sex regarding Ciel's route in case you somehow fucking could ever care. Skip to this time code to avoid all of that. So the main difference in Ciel's route is that after the gang defeat Roa, Roa pulls a quasi-reincarnation into Shiki's body. This is where Tsukihime pulls its classic move of introducing something interesting and then severely lacking the execution to follow through with it. As Shiki begins to battle the inclusion of Roa into his mind, he is gripped by violence and madness. There is this engaging push and pull of Shiki trying, but also failing, to fight off Roa's murderous intent. Being stuck in the head of a character with another character stuck in there too rackets up the tension. Seeing Shiki fighting a losing battle until he snaps and can no longer control his actions is the single most dramatic part of this route. And then it just kinda stops. After Shiki assaults Kohaku, he's still sharing space with Roa, but all that maddening interplay goes away. The story just has to move on to other things, like the confrontation with powered Ciel, and there isn't any time or focus on how internally fighting with Roa continues to haunt him. It's deflating because it really felt like this was the turnaround point, where Ciel's route was going to kick into next gear, and instead it reverts back to a story about these two flavorless pale cracker crisps sharing descriptive adjectives that can be counted on a hand or two. And to make sure the Roa insanity is undercut, Ciel then hops on top of Shiki because his clock has been stuck at midnight ever since he was possessed. Maybe the funniest and most cleanly removable H scene I've ever experienced. It's not a good H scene because of course it's not a good H scene, but God was I laughing. Once you see how it's meaninglessly sandwiched between two greater plot points, you can practically imagine yourself at the table of an editorial meeting where someone is asking why this had to be included. Anyways, then it ends after a while and you get to watch these two spineless homunculi be together in a route that I believe was supposed to be this thing called romance. It's just the drizzling shits. I was elated to be done. That's a wrap on both near side routes, the routes that are the two main heroines. One is about as misogynistic as possible, and one is as boring and flaccid as possible. I fail to see how anyone could have ever formed a fandom around this, but whatever. We were all stupid teens once. Hopefully these Far Side routes are much shorter so I can bang them all out next year and then award Tsukihime the lifetime achievement version of the Stubbed Toe Championship. Thank God we have Melty Blood. We do a little bit of golfing. Just hold the golf. Golf Peaks is an adorable little puzzler that is perfectly able to split between being a golf game and not playing like a golf game. Each level is a grid puzzle and you get a handful of cards that you use to move the ball. This is such a brilliant idea. It removes the mechanics of golf, but it still retains the feeling of playing it. While the game doesn't have any strokes or scores for getting the puzzle done in the fewest shots or anything like that, it still has the perfect mapping of, I have 4 cards in this puzzle, how do I get to the hole in 4 strokes? And what helps is that there are a lot of movement options and obstacles that are parallels of golf. You move the ball via both putting and chipping. You have to avoid bunkers and water hazards. All of these have different twists on the structure that help make for a more diverse puzzle. Everything is built so cleanly, so efficiently. If you remember A Little Golf Journey, that game had this goofy golf but not golf approach where taking shots became confounding on how to actually move the ball in the way to get the best score. But Golf Peaks is so streamlined that instead of thinking, how is this possible, you're thinking, how do I use these tools? It's so easy to lose yourself in looking at a puzzle, mousing over the grid and counting aloud, and then trying to work out a path. There is no friction other than the friction of thinking through the puzzle. But damn, when it comes time for friction, this game doesn't fuck around. Puzzles start getting real hard, making you think deeply about how to manage ball movement and either avoid hazards or use them to your advantage. It's got that best type of thinking. You need to see things for what they are, not what they say they do. You will get cards that trap you, like a card that moves the ball 5 spaces, but the way you use it in a puzzle is to only move it 1 space and then land in a hazard to reposition yourself. There were some levels that tickled my brain so hard that I just sat there and just had to look at every possible interaction to see what my move was. The game will quickly start asking you to think outside the box and then think outside the box from that box, and it can get extremely difficult, but in a good way. There's not a whole lot of deep dive analytics I need to say about Golf Peaks, but it doesn't need anything more said about it. It's a very well built puzzle game, it uses the golf theme to the best stretches of the idea, and it makes you think in more obtuse ways than you may first consider. I loved it. I have this problem when it comes to games. I am simply too excited about what the possibilities could be. When I am in the opening parts of a game and it hasn't fully played its hand yet, my mind races to think what is going to happen next. What rules is the game setting up? What lessons is it trying to teach me? This sounds good in theory, but when I'm playing a game that answers those questions with actually nothing interesting, I feel like I come down harsher on a game than I should. But also sometimes the game deserves it. You Will Die Here Tonight is a love letter to Resident Evil 1 and House of the Dead, and that's maybe its biggest flaw. It is too busy being sly about how much it loves those games to actually do something original and interesting for itself. Now, that's not fair because it has its own original hook, but that hook isn't really adding much, and much needs to be added. You Will Die Here Tonight follows a new recruit in the Ares division as they storm the Spencer Mansion. It's named like the Breckenridge Mansion or something, but it's actionably the Spencer Mansion, and somehow they are able to skirt copyrights. But from there, things start to get a bit strange. You take individual control of Ares members and attempt to escape the mansion, but as the mansion lets you know, you will die here tonight. Every death starts you back in the underground lab with a new member of the team. This is the big conceit You Will Die Here Tonight brings to the table, and I think it lands very poorly. It takes a lot of time to understand what kind of rules the game is playing with. Death is permanent and to be expected. When all of your team dies, you get a chance to continue if you have a certain item on you. That's fine, but it's more the way the game deals with character death that feels awkward. The idea is that what a team member collects in death can help anyone else on the team once you play as them, but this doesn't track as well as you would like. For example, if a team member dies from a puzzle, and they will because getting a puzzle wrong can likely lead to instant death, you don't get that item. But in other cases, a team member getting an item and then being killed off as part of the story still grants you that item. The direct example was doing the side quest thing that got me the submachine gun, but my character was forced to die right afterwards. This logic doesn't exactly line up, which leads to confusing ideas about how the game wants you to handle character death. Early on, there was a rib on the old shotgun puzzle from RE1. Now, I knew that taking the shotgun would open a trapdoor and plunge me into instant death spikes. Shit, I saw the spike pit myself, I'm no dummy. But I didn't know if that was actually what I was supposed to do. Is this a subversion of the shotgun puzzle where I'm supposed to die and then the weapon stays with my team? Turns out, no. This puzzle needs to be solved normally to get the shotgun, which is odd because getting a weapon through death is exactly how I got the submachine gun. This character death mechanic feels sloppy and forced and poorly communicated to the player. This is doubly so for the fact that only some characters can do some things. You can only upgrade weapons, do the submachine gun quest, or make first aid kits with unique characters, and you don't have an option to swap between them. For being the major gimmick to the game, it feels half-baked. Which wouldn't be so much of an issue if the game had anything else original going for it. There is a kinda cringe amount of callbacks to Resident Evil 1. You Will Die Here Tonight seems a little too focused on getting you to understand how much it loves and respects RE1 via directly referencing, if not copying, iconic RE1 moments and puzzles, and not focused enough on making its own original moves. It has some ideas, like being able to peep through keyholes, that I wanted to use but were never useful. You would think that you could peep into the next room to see if there's a zombie, but this never paid off for me, and paradoxically, you can't peep through keyholes when there's a zombie on the other side, which is a dead giveaway to back up from the door. Also, fuck it, just barge in. The combat system isn't gonna make it an issue. Maybe it's the House of the Dead diehard in me, but You Will Die Here Tonight is doing fuck all with the idea that enemy encounters are a first-person affair. Absolutely none of these encounters feel like they gain anything by being in first person. There is no additional tension or action because the rank-and-file zombies all kinda do the same thing, and you can dispatch them safely with a billion knife hits. Sure, they could grab onto you, but it's easy to shake them off with no issue. It's just not doing anything to justify this move. Like, eventually you get some zombies with weapons, and I was thinking, oh, maybe I can hit their arm to make them drop it, or maybe I can shoot it out of the air when they throw it, like in House of the Dead. But neither of those things worked. It's a waste, and in a sense, it makes the game easier because instead of fearing encounters and trying to dodge zombies, I just knifed everyone I saw with no difficulty. Everything in this game just screams poorly implemented. The characters are all inflated genre staples who aren't entertaining or interesting past punched up parodies trying too hard to be B-movie acts. The combat doesn't have much to offer, and the Resident Evil parts just make me think, I'd rather play Resident Evil. There's times where the weird death and time shenanigans make the game seem interesting, but the actual experience of playing it was very lackluster. I quit after a while. Eventually, you have to do battle with a big Resident Evil spider, and at that point, the game wasn't entertaining enough to justify first-person spider scares. I think there's something cool lying underneath everything, but You Will Die Here Tonight is too busy dressing up as its heroes to actually be one. You Will Die Here Tonight pretty easily wins the Stub Toe Award for 2024. As Tsukihime is still not in contention for being the worst game I played this year, this one gets it instead. I've heard people gas this game up, and maybe there's just something I was missing that everyone else got, but when I uninstalled this game, I didn't have to think twice about it. You ever boot up a game and see the logo of an old friend's? I don't know, man. There was a time in the world where seeing a certain game company's logo was a mark of quality instead of a reason to let out a hefty sigh. Kids react to the era where Konami was cool and not hated by every one of their fan bases. What I'm trying to say is that starting Air Combat and seeing just the thick old Namco logo instead of that bastard of a Bamco one took me back to a better time. Anyways, enough of the lead buried. Air Combat is what you might more informally know as the first Ace Combat game, the start of the long combat flight sim series. I have not played any of the Ace Combat games, but I hear they're quite good. And if I'm being honest, starting with Air Combat didn't sell me on a high quality long running series. This game is by no means bad, but I had a friend call it a proof of concept, and that reads as real accurate. Air Combat kind of feels like a half-step evolution from an arcade release. It's just a little bigger than what you would expect standing at the arcade cabinet, but this is also 1995, so it still looks a little behind the times as an early console offering to what an arcade release would have been able to kick out. I kind of can't glaze over this. Air Combat is graphically compromised. You are primarily flying by systems because the amount of world detail is rarely more than some flat textures on a full screen color gradient. That doesn't inherently kill the game. Unless you're talking about the one stage that takes place during nighttime and is nearly impossible to see anything. but there is a desire for more presentation that the game just can't offer. The most interesting stages have some real estate attached to them, where you actually get buildings, oil refineries, naval docks, or what have you. Not every stage is able to pull that off. You get 2 stages where you have to snake through a trench, and this is the only time we get a fully built level to fly through, and while very slight, these are 2 of my favorite missions. If you can ignore the occasional feeling that you are flying into nothingness, air combat works very well. I don't really deal with flight games like this, so I can't comment too much on the control of the planes, but I find the play of air combat to be perfectly serviceable with flashes of brilliance. Combat is twofold. You have a machine gun that I was able to effectively use literally once, and lock on missiles. These are really your only 2 verbs in the world. You need to get within 1,000 units of a target to lock on a missile, of which you can only fire 2 at a time. You have a variety of planes you can choose for any mission, but I never felt a huge difference between them. Like, what's the difference between offense and power? The most noticeable attribute is your stealth bombers, who apparently won't show up on the enemy radar. I'm taking their word for it. This boils down gameplay into 17 missions of, how can I fire 2 missiles at something? I'm not going to criticize the missions themselves because they all have a variety of simple objectives to try and frame each level differently. But after a while, you realize every question has an answer, and that answer is, I need to lock on and fire 2 missiles. But as I said, there are flashes of brilliance. When you get into a dogfight and you're turning your fighter jet around and you do a barrel roll to change positioning to keep a lock on your enemy, you feel it. That special whoa moment of just how cool soaring through the air taking out bogeys is. Air combat is by no means a bad game, but I think it kind of washed over me until I did that barrel roll technique. That's when I feel locked in. There really isn't too much more to say about air combat. I think there's a certain Namco arcadey charm that comes across in the presentation and the music. The scoring UI and the kinda cheesy guitar shredding place you in a time frame that feels a little old for 95, but as mentioned above, proof of concept is a real accurate way to describe this game. I would still recommend playing it, mainly because it's not very long and can be banged out in a couple sittings, but I am more excited for getting to Ace Combat 2 and 3, where I've been told this series really takes off. I've had this physical copy of Drakengard for probably 8 odd years or so because my friend Richard bought it for me when the Rite 8 on 8 and Newburgh was closing down, and for some fucky ass reason they had a couple PS2 games still stocked. Now, the only Yoko Taro game I've played previous was Nier Automata, a game that I really loved at the time, but have since cooled on a little bit. My general knowledge of the first Drakengard is that the game actually factually fucking sucks, but it has pervert sicko catnip inside if you're that type of diseased in the head. And they are right! This game fucking blows! The combat is horrifically repetitive, the draw distance for enemy pop-ins is too shallow, meaning you have to open up your main map to figure out what direction you head in. The mini-map is also too shallow to guide you towards enemy groups. You need to use the mini-map because the camera control of this game was made by a freak. The right analog stick pivots the camera's view, but not in relation to your controls or direction, making it almost meaningless. You have to recenter the camera by hitting L2 to guard. You will want to recenter the camera because fucking get this. The L1 and R1 dodge rolls will send you in the direction the camera is facing instead of the direction the player is facing. The Dynasty Warriors light attack string into heavy attack ender system only allows specific attacks, denoted with a flash, to have a heavy ender, which mostly works but also feels clunky like everything else. And maybe most damning of all, the game runs out of interesting enemy encounters or designs almost immediately and pads every single level up by having you complete objectives like eliminate these 14 slightly beefier than normal enemy group leaders, or take down these 8 big boys that have 9 times more health than they should, while still posing basically no threat because the combat system in this game is fashioned out of sticks and twine. It's fucking amazing. I could not stop playing it. As if this is somehow a new development, I do suffer from the type of sickness that made me fall head over heels for Drakengard. Don't get it twisted, everything I said above is a real complaint that drags down the actual playing of this game, but I was able to find enjoyment in all of that, plus some of the things that it maybe does well. You equipped a loadout of 8 weapons, all of which can be upgraded to level 4 through racking up kills that make their combos and magic attacks stronger. You also get this is a little faux pas because it predates the game, but it's the best reference point, Dark Souls stories for each weapon that continue as they level up. There are a fucking stupid amount of weapons to find and level, and all previous stages can be revisited so you can hunt for or grind them. This Dynasty Warriors Musou is also only one game mode in Drakengard, as you can lay siege to ground troops with your dragon or get in separate flight combat stages where you blast down foes with your magical might. While these flight combat stages are among the best controlling parts of the game, like honestly I think these are legitimately great, they are also shorter by magnitudes of 20. Some of these stages are over in less than 5 minutes, which is good because that's really just how long they should be, but then you go back to Patty McPadded ground sequences that feel like they are sucking your soul out through a bendy straw. So yes, this game runs like penis, has some decent systems bogged down by many clunky ones, and feels as though it had to pad the game after the first hour because any interesting design ideas come almost to a crawl after starting it. To reiterate, I loved it. And that's because of everything that has to do with the story and presentation. I cannot say this is the best soundtrack I've ever heard, but it is probably the most interesting. It is composed by Takayuki Aihara and Nobuyoshi Sano. Yes, that's right, the fucking Street Fighter EX guy and the motherfucking Ridge Racer and Tekken guy. And what did these two titans create? Drakengard's soundtrack is orchestral music chopped, sampled, remixed, and layered over itself to create possibly the most mentally unstable European war dances imaginable. There is an obvious and purposeful lack of care to smooth over samples and loops. You will hear auditory breaks and pauses, and it feels like the music is skipping. It's often harsh on the ears, and it does so with reason. The soundtrack in this game is trying to get across what murderous insanity feels like because an insane murderer is who you are controlling. Main character Kaim is what you get when a game asks you to slaughter hundreds on hundreds of enemies. He isn't some noble hero slicing through fodder to save the day. He is notably bloodthirsty and revenge-fueled. He has never once thought about taking a life, and he is likely insane in the literal sense of the word. I say likely because maybe 30 minutes into the game, Kaim loses the ability to speak. Kaim is injured by an attack, and while he continues to fight with a big-ass sword slice in his back, he finds the Red Dragon in equally dire straits. They both know their numbers are likely up, so they form a pact to combine their strength. But this pact has a price. Kaim loses his voice. The dragon becomes the main talker in this game, and while she speaks in Kaim's place, she definitely doesn't speak for him. Your mindless slaughtering will often be interrupted by the dragon or other characters to banter. And this is, as far as I can tell, a Yoko Taro thing, as it happens a lot in Nier Automata 2. But it works so much better in Drakengard. You see, Nier Automata has an actually functional combat system, so I had to do a modicum of focusing when playing it, which meant that I wasn't all that happy about doing boss battles and trying to read a conversation at the same time. But because Drakengard borders on as lifeless as possible, each one of these interruptions is welcomed. I don't want to say too much about the actual story for spoilerinos, but it has no problem being very out there. I've joked a couple times about the dragon's views on incest. You know what? Never mind. Let me just go read my own banger tweet real quick. Drakengard is a game where you do the same combo against enemies who pose no threat and have 9 times more health than they should, while a dragon goes, "Truly, I have never bore witness to the type of darkness that lies in the heart of man. Who can say if incest is a good or bad thing?" Like, minor spoilers, but kinda not really. I feel like a lot of this game is insane. In like the more literal sense that the internal sanity has slipped and cracked and things both do not make full sense and are tinted with a level of madness. Plot points kinda come and go in a haphazard way, not fully making sense until you go back and unlock additional story beats that maybe help but also introduce more insanity. This feeds into the thing Yoko Taro games are known for, the multiple endings. And this is where Drakengard gets infamous. The first 4 endings can be gained with relative linear ease, but the 5th and final ending requires you to collect every weapon in the game, a task that takes a stupendous amount of time and is basically impossible without access to a guide. No one recommends that you do this. It's such a boring tax upon your life, so just look it up on YouTube. Don't waste your existence collecting 60 plus weapons in this game to access that final ending. But I did that, because I think this game is a masterpiece. Drakengard feels like it bounces between art and outsider art. Occasionally it does something so amazing, like the dragonflight levels or the soundtrack. Often it does something utterly head-scratching and not at all how anyone competent would ever do it, like how grounded dodging works or the awful sensation of swinging any of the heavy weapons. I don't think I fully buy into the idea that this game is bad on purpose, that the game is making statements about violence and slaughter by making you, the player, go through mind-numbing combat to see all of its content. Nor do I fully think that there was a grand point that wraps up the entire game in a satisfactory way. I think this game would be worse if any of that was true. Instead, I love this game because it simply exists in a lane that no other game would. It feels like they knew some aspects of this game were winners, some aspects of this game were losers, and they didn't have the time or money or skill to fix it. And their solution was just to say, fuck it, we ball. I wish I could talk about this more. I wish I had it in me to do a full video about Drakengard, but it's really not my format. Because Drakengard is something so special, it feels like it deserves a big video. This is not something I can recommend to everyone, but it's one of the best games I played this year. You need to be a certain type of person to lock in with Drakengard. No shame at all if you bounce off of it, but if you can hang with Drakengard, you can appreciate just how different of a game this is than anything else you've ever played. I think that's why I love it so much. It's one of one. There's nothing else like Drakengard. No one else would make Drakengard. If any other studio had a half-done Drakengard in their lap, they would do something to fix it up. I have played a lot of bad games. I do not think Drakengard is a game that is bad. I think it is a game that is insane. Welcome to the intermission. I just want to say thank you all so much for the love on the Final Fantasy VI video. I've been kind of hunting and praying for like a big win on this platform, and that's probably as big of a win as I'm ever gonna get. So hell yeah, thank you so much to everybody that did a lot of work for finally getting some eyeballs on this channel, and I'm eternally grateful that you pull the slot machine enough times and you tell Vegas to fuck off, I'm taking the money with it. You know, that's just how it goes. Eventually you win. 90% of people who lose at the gambling table, they were one pull away. Anyways, part of that is, I'm just kind of putting this out here as a record to hold myself against this. Part of that influx of people watching that video is that it was able to push me across the threshold for monetization of this channel, and I'm just putting this out here so that people will know and that I can hold myself accountable to this ideology. I am never going to put ads or any sort of monetization on this channel. It's against what I believe. for starters. I think this is art. I think art should be available to all to enjoy. I don't ever want to put ads. I'm never going to make enough money off of this to make it worthwhile. And just to peek behind the curtain, I have a really good career. I make enough money doing what I do for a day job. I don't need this to be anything that I draw additional income from. And I don't know if there's a possibility where I could draw additional income from this to offset the damage it would do to the product to just have ads on it. So I won't. And there's also some additional things where like I use footage from other people's works, and I don't know if I actually feel okay taking profit on something that has used other people's work and me drawing money from it and them not having a say in that. So I think on many levels I never will do monetization on this channel, with like two exceptions, which is one, if this channel becomes so popular that it would just be moronic to not make money off of it, which I don't foresee, but if it happens to be that way, if I just become a big sensation overnight one day, I'll turn it on because it'd be stupid not to. And two, if something ever happened to my career where I would need to monetize this channel to support my family. Those are the two big things. And really it'd be number two, I think, is more relevant than number one. I'm never going to blow up. I don't I don't foresee that happening. If it happens, so be it, but I don't foresee that one happening. A couple bits of housekeeping people might be interested in. Last year I told you I got that RetroTink 5X. That thing bangs. You've seen it a couple times in this video now. I also have a Mister. It's right down there. You'll see some footage in a second because you can't see it. I'm not going to unplug it to show it to you. But I finally got a Mister from Mr. Add-ons. This thing is the future. This is black magic. It's so fucking cool. I cannot believe this thing is real. For a variety of reasons, Misters are amazing. You know, the FPGA emulation allows for a perfect emulation of games, which is important for a lot of people, but as someone like me who deals primarily in fighting games, that has been a savior to so many games across tournament scenes. It's just unfathomable what this thing has been able to do, and finally being able to own one, it's just next level. I don't know how to. I tried to explain to my wife. I'm like, you can't understand. This thing's almost not real. I don't even know what to tell you. This is unthinkable what this thing does. The other thing I picked up was an Ambernick SP. That's the handheld emulator that is in the actual form function of a Game Boy SP, but you can see that there's 4 face buttons and 4 shoulder buttons. So this thing can pretty easily go up to about PS1. It falters at N64 and it falters at Saturn, but it has allowed me to play games more realistically because I spend a lot of time not on a couch being able to play games. I have a lot of my day where it's like I got 15 minutes. What I do, and I'd be playing games that way now instead of like sitting on my fucking phone doing a whole lot of nothing. And with that, there's going to be something we're going to introduce here at the intermission every year. We're calling it Retro Rundown Handheld Hoedown. And that's just going to cover the games I've played on the Ambernick. And there's not going to be any footage associated with that because I'm not taking the time to record footage. This isn't for content. This is just games I've played that I'm not recording, so I can't make it a part of the show. And there's really only 2 I played this year because I got this thing pretty late. So we'll just go over them now. Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. This game is very interesting to me. It's a Game Boy game, and I think it's very interesting to look at the design of Wario Land because it's Mario, but what if it was horizontal? And what I mean by that is a lot of old Mario style, not even old Mario, a lot of traditional Mario design is vertical in a sense. What can Mario do in terms of jumping up to something and jumping down on something? You'll get fire flowers and whatnot that allows you to more horizontally interact, but so much of Mario's verb set either involves him going up or going down to interact with things. And Wario Land asks the same question but horizontally. How can I interact with things left and right? They still have ways to interact with things vertically, but so much of the game is based around what can I do to the things in front of me, and what can I do to the things behind me, or flipped around, what can I do in front of me, and what can I turn around and do to myself the other way. It's a very good platformer because Nintendo doesn't make bad platformers. But the other thing I'd like to mention is that there's a really good theming with Wario in terms of post-stage gambling. The thing with Wario Land is that it's so much more centered around coins in a way that Mario games, typically coins become kind of almost a lost economy that doesn't matter anymore. You collect coins to collect one-ups, and one-ups become irrelevant at a certain point unless you're just bombing out of certain stages. Wario, coins mean a lot. And so because of that, at the end of every stage, you have the chance to either gain more hearts, which will get you a 1-up, or you can take 3 spins, so to speak, at a 50-50 to increase your coins. You can go to a room, and then you can pull one of 2 levers. One will double the amount of coins that you would gain from that level, and one will subtract half of that coins that you gain from the level. And it's this thing in particular that I really think nails the theming of Wario. Wario would gamble all the time. Like, he wants to go big or go home. And a lot of times you do go home. A lot of times you don't make it out with a lot of coins. And I think that's something that's so cool about the game. I don't know how else to describe that other than like this tiny little flavor detail really sells what Wario is. The other game I spent a fair amount of time but did not get too far into this year was the first Mega Man Battle Network. And it's so interesting to go back and look at this game from 2024 to what it thought the future was in like 2001. There is this quaint Y2K optimism with the way that technology works that, looking back through 25 years or so of what they thought the world was going to be like, it's wistful because it didn't end up that way, but you can see how they thought technology was going to integrate with things. And it's kind of sad that it didn't, if that's so. Like, you can jack into almost any sort of machinery, but there's a physicality to like, this thing needs a jack-in port. This thing needs an Ethernet port, more or less, to be able to get into, because this is before Wi-Fi or Bluetooth were really invented and popularized. So there's still this like, the world is advancing through a digital age, but the world is advancing physically through a digital age. And that's so much of the basis of how Mega Man Battle Network's theming works. I really enjoy how quaint that is. Also, the soundtrack's banging. I just don't know what else to tell you. Like, the soundtrack to this game fucking rips. All the songs are so crazy. And of course, this goes without saying that, like, if you know anything about Mega Man Battle Network, it's this awesome deck builder, like action RPG that's grid based. It's something that never really was seen before and really hasn't been seen since, other than games like Once Upon a Something or Other, or whatever the fuck that game's called, that just directly references it, because nothing else really decided to be this type of game. It's really rough around the edges. I think I finally hit the point in this game that a lot of people are like, oh, this is where it gets maybe a little bad. But the joy of seeing a game that is maybe this optimistic about the future and also this rough and tumble with something that's so new in an RPG, it's really enjoyable to go back. You have to be able to see the game with the lens of, we are going back to see this. A couple other notes of housekeeping. We're going to introduce a new series to the show channel next year called Playing Every Final Fantasy Kinda Gaiden, and that piggybacks off of the Ambernick, because that is going to be covering games I play on this thing that are not within the scope of Playing Every Final Fantasy Kinda, that I still want to play and I probably still want to talk about, and it's going to be a vlog series. So for example, the first episode is going to be me covering Final Fantasy 1 and yes, I played the Pixel remaster for the show, but I still want to play the NES version, and I want to see what's different and what what is missed, what is added, so to speak. I feel like I maybe you can actually I don't even feel like you can see it in that video, the FF1 video and the FF6 video. When I mentioned it again, I feel like I did FF1 a disservice, and so that is the impetus of like maybe I go back and I play FF1, FF2, FF3, NES. Maybe I play Final Fantasy Legend, aka Saga 1. Maybe I play Final Fantasy Adventure. Maybe I play Mystic Quest. I play things that are within the actual Final Fantasy oeuvre that I do not feel qualified for the show, but I can play them in my spare time because I play video games for entertainment of my personal time, and I can talk about them in a vlog format without delving into the honestly arduous amounts of production that goes into actually making videos for playing Final Fantasy ever. And then final piece of housekeeping, I'm off Twitter. I don't use it anymore. Anyone who's been alive digitally this year knows exactly why. I am full-time on Blue Sky. I've already started changing a lot of the branding on this website to remove or decrease the importance of my Twitter profile. If you want to follow or interact with me, it's on Blue Sky 100% now. I'm not on Twitter. Fuck them. Anyways, let's get to the actual main event of the intermission, the Idolism's Art of the Year contest. As I mentioned before, it is only going to be top 4 this year because I didn't do a whole lot of art because so much of this year was dominated by Final Fantasy shows that I didn't do a whole lot of art for it. So with that, let's do the runner-up this year. 5th place. Okay, I got the shit pulled up on my phone because if I use the computer screen, that's currently doubling as my lighting. The lighting in this room is so awful. I have to use my monitor as like a forced lighting because anything else would look horrendous. Anyways, runner-up this year is in 5th place, Tsukihime Arc's Route from Gaming in the 2023 year. And I like this piece. I think this is kind of well done. It doesn't speak to me in like a big way, but I do think it was able to get that certain vibe, that grittiness, that darkness across. Tied for 4th place, we have Mahjong Soul from Gaming in the 2023 year and the thumbnail from Love Is All Around, the movie, the game, the review. And of the two of these, I like Mahjong Soul way more. There's something very sleek, very like the correct colors about it that I like. Thumbnail, I don't know. Thumbnail was a little cynical from me. I wanted it to be kind of the design ethos that actually gets clicks. A lot of the Love Is All Around video was designed for, I don't want to say engagement, but it was meant to be a little bit more appealing, both in the naming, because I said review in the name of it, and then I made a thumbnail that kind of had the focus that thumbnails on YouTube want. And it worked a little bit, but I didn't get like monstrously more views from it. So I see that as almost a failed experiment. Like the point of that was, okay, if I play to the system a little more, will I get more results from this? And the answer is not really. So I think it's a very attractive piece, but there is also a part of that that's like, failed experiment. 3rd place is Y, also known as No Seriously Explain, from Presenting Eroge Girl Pop. And I like this a lot. I think it's got great color composition, great focus. The background's very interesting. And I think it just pops in a certain almost Y2K-ish way that I found so attractive when I made it. So I think this is like a unilateral win for me. I was really, really happy with this piece. Speaking of, 2nd place goes to the thumbnail from Presenting Eroge Girl Pop, and I loved this. I spent a little bit of time trying to figure out how to make something with a slight tinge of titillation to it. Like, it's very well done and it's very discreet, but like it's also an anime girl like taking her bra off. It's not the focus of it. It's not like titties in your face, but it's there. And the big thing for this piece was trying to find what is the copy or the font that is going to tie this together, because I had a number of things that I used beforehand, but finding that font was like, that's it right there. Like, we got it, we have it in the bag. And so when that was put on the thing, I was just like, oh shit, it's so good now. This is exactly what it needed to be. This is exactly what I saw it in my brain. So I'm glad that did well, because I think that's one of the better things I've made. And the grand champion, first place for Art of the Year, kind of to no surprise, I think, it is Pseudo Regalia from Gaming in the 2023 year. In a sense, I'm not too proud of this. It's a very attractive, but this was the year that I started using asset packs to help bolster a lot of my design work, because when you're like me and almost everything you've done is self-taught, you just think you have to build everything yourself. And I realized that no, people don't build everything themselves. They use assets. Like, they use the works of other people that are meant to be used to help create things. And so this was my first piece where I was like, oh, I'm gonna use some asset pack vectors to make better designs, because I can't really make certain things by myself. I need to use assets for it. And by kind of just slamming a bunch of assets on the page, I made this piece, and it's so attractive. But a part of me was like, well, I kind of just put a bunch of fucking vectors on a gray background. It's very attractive still. There's a certain art to making it so sleek that I will recognize, but I'm not the most proud of it. But I totally understand why it won, because it is very good. So, congratulations to Pseudo Regalia from Gaming in the 2023 year for winning the Idolism's Art of the Year 2024. Anyways, that's it for the intermission. Let's get back to the video, because there's only so much more left to cover. Summertime lovin', lovin' in the summertime. Doukyuusei Bangin' Summer is a full overhaul remake of the iconic original game, one of the forerunners in pushing the dating sim genre. And I think the importance is felt because this remake feels crafted with so much love and care that it blows my mind. This game is stunning. Every background, character, UI choice, song, vocal performance, everything. It all rings with so much attention and detail. I think it would be nearly impossible to not get wrapped up into the world this game presents. As much as everything is firing on all cylinders, nothing might be as on point as the script. This might be the most I've ever smiled and laughed during a video game. Conversations have a perfect ebb and flow, allowing for multiple flavors of voice to come through from the cast and for the main character Takeru to play off them. Takeru has a knack for being so quick-witted that I laughed out loud in ways most video games can only make me half chuckle. Certain pairings like Takeru and Satomi are riotously funny. But comedy isn't the script's only trick. Takeru is occasionally poignant in ways that feel both natural and unexpected. Able to ponder on a concept or problem that produces an answer, but never feeling forced or like it came out of thin air. The writing allows him to be funny when he needs to be, and thoughtful when it counts. It goes a long way in making him charming. Instead of girls falling for you just because you are the main character of the universe, it feels believable that all these girls would give him the time of day because he has a charisma about himself that is very attractive. And somewhere within that charisma is what makes the concept for this game land. Doukyuusei is a dating sim where, after spending the first half of summer break working and saving up money, you spend the second half of break going out into the city, enjoying yourself, and chatting up girls. Chasing skirts, if you will. This is by no means an original pitch. Anyone with even a remote interest in Japanese media has come across the idea of your last summer before graduation, how you need to cherish the last days of your youth, and the importance of making special memories that will last a lifetime. Even with how abundantly popular this scenario is, Doukyuusei is the first time I really got it. I grew up a little strangely. I hated summer vacation. I lived in rural Michigan, and summer vacation basically meant I was going to be out in the middle of nowhere for a couple of months. I wouldn't see my friends, and I wouldn't really play that many video games because my parents wanted me to not stay inside all summer. So similarly to spring break, another American cultural touchstone I never once interacted with, I actually had a negative relationship with summer vacation. But in Doukyuusei, I finally feel like I get that melancholy of the last days of your youth and how to make the most of it. And it's the structure that makes the experience. Doukyuusei uses the genre of dating sim to paint this feeling of being a part of other people's experiences in a way that a more linearly structured story or visual novel can't. In the original release, you have to be constantly checking locations at different times to find interactions with the girls, part of the gameplay being learning their schedules and events so you can complete their stories. The remake, by default, starts you in easy mode, where all the big event triggers are put on your calendar and you can just zoom right to that flag if you so desire. While this is extremely helpful in removing the guesswork from the game, I must say that cutting through all of the game to just warp to specific girls' event triggers will ruin the experience. See, the city is so much more alive than just hitting flags to progress the story. In fact, if that's all you do, I think the amount of character you get from the cast is highly truncated. If you are looking at all these girls' events as just a linear route, they are actually quite small. Outside of their specific story events, the cast of girls just exist in the world normally, going to their extracurriculars, working their part-time jobs, or just being out and about. Exploring around and finding them gives you extra time to get to know them more in a way that buzzing through the game by warping to event triggers wouldn't. Be it spending more time learning about Miho as she works at the flower shop, or continuously finding Satomi in the school's equipment room as she tries to blow off an explanation as to why she's there. These feel important in a way that the game doesn't exactly signal like they do with the event triggers. This exploration is more than just based around the girls. There are all sorts of hidden goodies, secret areas, quiz houses, random money on the ground, and more to be found just by walking the streets and interacting where you can. You should play on easy mode, but use it as an in-game guide instead of a fast travel. That summertime feeling won't come across if you just laser target on one person. By interacting with everything and everyone, Takeru's last summer feels like it has those memories start to take place. Some of my favorite moments were the casual dates you go on, taking multiple girls to the coffee shop and just talking with them. Because the writing and character work is so strong, you feel like you could just stay there forever and just chit-chat. You want to experience what all the cast has to offer because almost everyone is drawn up so well that they are engaging to interact with. Also, you kind of have to. Certain routes will only unlock if you become friendly enough with other girls. Getting further with Mako requires you to be friendly with her sister, Ako. To advance with Misa, you need to go a certain amount down the path of her friend Miho. The inverse is also true. Finishing out some girls' routes will hard lock out others. I think the most fun I had was trying to do everything, realizing I got locked out of Hiromi's route by doing Reiko's route and thinking, okay, I'll keep that in mind for my next playthrough. If there is one issue I have with the game, it's that sometimes it reminds me that it's an eroge. Similarly how Koni feels about fighting games, I don't play video games to come. Ironically, I'm about the least horny person you'll meet. I've had multiple instances of people thinking I'm asexual, and I'm not, but I get why that's come up. So there are times where Doukyuusei gets a little pornographic and I'm like, oh man, can we get back to the story? But that's on me. This isn't eroge and it's giving that to people who want it, and there are occasions where that person is not I. It's also not constantly trying to be pornographic though. For better or for worse, it tries to give you everything. If you are here for something erotic, it has you covered. Some routes are very quick and have a certain banging the pizza delivery man kind of vibe to them. If you are here for something more tender-hearted and romantic, it has you covered too. Multiple routes, honestly the vast majority, are dramatic, character-driven romance tales that lay on the emotions extra thick. Sometimes the whiplash between the two can be a little unexpected, but I think overall it's a strength of the game. It's trying to give everybody something. In fact, the points where the game shines the most is when it gives you both. There's a number of routes that have arrow scenes that are not really that titillating. Instead, the act itself is how characters, Takeru included, work out their feelings. You don't just get it on because you are wrapped up in passion. Sometimes it's because of vulnerabilities or self-loathing or misplaced brash determination. Sure, sex can be based on romance or hormones, but it can also be based on rebellion. It can be based on mistakes. It can help and it can harm in equal measure. In fact, there is one scene that I found deeply uncomfortable, a scene I didn't want to continue playing through, but the progress of the story made me engage with it, and it did so because the point is that Takeru is massively fucking up. If there's one thing I would sell this game with, it's that people can hook up for more nakedly human reasons, and the game will address that with care. This kind of dovetails into the two ways to play this game. If you pick up Doukyuusei Bangin Summer on Steam, you are by default getting the non-erotic version of the game. Out there on the internet is an 18+ patch that restores all the arrow content. What's strange is just how different these two versions of the game are. This isn't just a patch to unlock boobies, this kinda dramatically changes the game. The Steam version and the 18+ version have different scripts, as the 18+ version is jam-packed with much more crass quips and boner comedy lines, whereas the Steam version is tamer and more artful about what it says. But the 18+ patch also restores a bunch of stuff that is oddly missing from the Steam version. Certain backgrounds, like in the school, are completely missing people in the Steam version. In the 18+ version, you can get these restored, and sure, maybe the background for the swim team area has a naked woman in the corner, but I'm not sure why that wasn't removed or covered up, and literally instead, all the people are gone. The Steam version also removes CGs that are quizzically innocuous, while leaving other, more racy ones intact. In the Steam version, this CG with Mai and this CG with Akko are replaced with black screens despite having absolutely nothing censorable about them. Meanwhile, the 18+ patch will reinsert quasi-random humorous sex scenes with NPCs at random locations, and again, this is really like boner comedy kind of stuff. Whatever way you decide to play Doukyuusei, it's well worth doing so. This remake nails everything. Outside of subjective stuff that just wasn't for me, I think every second of this game gave me a reason to smile. It's a game I want to keep talking about, but I need to hold back because I want other people to experience it. I highly recommend playing it, and if you need an additional push to do so, go check out Amelie Doree's video that goes into much more depth about the game. Amelie Doree mentioned! I feel like I need something more from Tormentum, but I don't know if I can put a finger on what exactly that more is. Up front, this is basically Geiger and Basinski : the point-and-click game. I'm not breaking any new ground by saying that. The devs are very open about their influences. And that's cool, but I think I need some sort of connective tissue between the inhuman and creepy artwork and the game I play. Basically, I think there is a lack of cohesion between all the aspects that make up Tormentum. It being a point-and-click adventure game doesn't exactly pair well with it being a showcase of Geiger and Basinski influenced work. It being a showcase of Geiger and Basinski influenced work doesn't exactly pair well with it being a contained world I explore and exist in. And when you break it down to those elements, maybe the problem is that those individual pieces all need something that is counter to the others. The reason why Geiger and Basinski's artwork is so beloved is because it plays in this deeply surreal realm. There are shapes and forms that look somewhat familiar, or in Geiger's case sexual, but the whole of it is inhuman in a way that leaves us grasping. We can see some of it, but are unable to see all of it because it does not exist in a form we can map realism onto. It's that gray space, that surreality that makes them so powerful. Now, how do you take the idea of that and layer it over a point-and-click game? A point-and-click game needs to be the opposite of all that. It needs to be grounded, understandable, clear and concise to not turn frustrating. You need to have leaps in logic that make sense, lest you become an old-school moon logic adventure game, and those have deeply fallen out of favor. Because of that, both the puzzle solving and the adventuring are asking for the one thing this type of art influence cannot give you. The game would not be more enjoyable if space and travel were so alien to usher in a feeling of constant unease, so it's a single screen game because that helps it make sense. But by being a single screen game that makes sense, movement between areas lack any real flow or world building or evoking power. It just comes off like each screen is a new area of cool art. And again, cool art works when it's cool art. But here it just becomes background flavoring because I have to do something in this space, and to do something in this space, it needs to be understandable. So take this for example. A prisoner you came in with is stuck in a cage and you need to throw the switch, but a monster is guarding it. He tells you that if you whip up some poisoned meat, you can deal with the beast, so find a kitchen. Pause. In a world of swirling, jagged nightmares, where screaming, torture, and biomechanical tissue fill the senses, a kitchen feels out of place. That's what I mean when I say the game lacks connective tissue. You need a kitchen because you need to prepare poisoned meat to defeat a monster. But all of that I just described sounds so pedestrian in what is otherwise the flayed and flaking hellscape of eternal suffering. It's like going to hell and finding the break room for staff. And then you do all that and get one of multiple 2010s super black or super white morality choices. Or take this tortured soul, cursed to ponder the questions of life for all eternity, freed only when you sit down and do a fucking junior jumble block puzzle. I'm not trying to damn the game for this. It's trying to have a unique setting and still be a point-and-click puzzler. But the disconnect between those two things feel fucking gargantuan. So what I want instead is something about the gameplay and the interaction with the game to try and match the twisted sculpture of the world. Yes, it would be more frustrating if you were using items you could not define, trying to read and decipher shapes not known to man, but it would make you feel like you really exist in this nightmare unreality. And I think that's what in the end damns Tormentum the most. The world of horrors around you feel like a coat of paint over what is otherwise a pretty by-the-books point-and-click puzzle game. I'm not trying to be too mean. I understand this is a small dev team made up of Polish brothers, but it just can't pull off what I think it wanted to. It only takes a couple unnatural sights for them to start feeling pedestrian, and doing rote piano note puzzles isn't going to alleviate that. I did not do this on purpose, but I think Felvidek pretty much gave me exactly what I was looking for from Tormentum. Unless you are, fucking somehow, deeply familiar with 15th century Slovakia, there is going to be a supremely alien feeling trying to decipher what is happening. Characters speak a form of English that I cannot fully parse. I mostly assume that it is accurate to 15th century Slovakian dialect, but sometimes phrasing and terms show up that feel opposite to that. It is jarring, and it forces you to sit down and really read the conversations. It's not something that you can just read without pause. Multiple passages required me to slow down and read something over a couple times to try and get a grasp on exactly what they were saying. This is compounded by the times where non-English words and phrases show up. Sometimes I'm trying to figure out if a term is a curse or exclamatory statement, and sometimes I'm trying to figure out why there is a discrepancy in how characters are addressed. Is he being called a nickname? Is it a title? I don't know. But the beauty of that is that if you really pay attention, you can still suss out what's going on. I may not know anything about the Hussites or 15th century clergymen, but I can follow conversations enough to understand what's mostly being said. It perfectly rides the line of being something alienating, something you have to hang on tightly to understand, but never being cryptic enough or requiring a studious enough knowledge of Slovakia that you get lost. Pay enough attention and you can decipher the personalities of the characters, get a better understanding of who exactly they are and how they operate. Because when the game starts, it doesn't wait up for you. It's go time from the very beginning. And once you are locked in enough to read what's going on in the conversation, you can see just how fucking funny Felvidek is. It's not like a laugh out loud comedy, but there are a significant number of personalities that clash in very entertaining ways and can elicit a pretty good chuckle more often than you might expect from a game like this. Also, I guess it's a JRPG, but that's really not the important part of this game. You will occasionally do battles to progress through the story, and these are purely fine. Outside of looking like they are viciously ripping off the style of Hylics, there isn't too much to talk about here. The mechanics are basic, you get enough skills for worthwhile decision making, and somehow the difficulty seems tuned to be exactly right. Many of these battles had me winning by the skin of my teeth, almost to the point where I felt it was intentional because I was just barely scraping by. I doubt that is the case, but it made me think there was just a little pinch of magic behind the game to make combat counters feel just tight enough. But honestly, the JRPG stuff feels a little tacked on to justify Felvidek as a game. It is really and truly at its most interesting when you are running around and following the story. This is only 3 or so hours long. More if you get confused on what you're supposed to do, which is very possible. This script does not hand feed you information all the time. So the plotting of all the beats is moving at a breakneck pace. I almost don't want to say anything more. Like, sure, I could talk about the grainy, burnt photocopy monochromatic style of the game, but if you've been using your eyeballs, then its interesting presentation is evident enough. It's something you play because you are lost, literally, in a narrative, and you keep fighting to try and understand what's going on. There is absolutely nothing else like Felvidek out there. Not to say it's a perfect game that is unmissable, but that there isn't a single game I can think of that either presents such a strange historical, yet occasionally modern world, or a game that drags you through its story kicking and screaming because if you don't understand what's going on, well, that's on you. This is the perfect amount of confusion, and it makes Felvidek a game worth recommending. I don't think this is 100% nostalgia speaking, maybe more like 75% nostalgia, but this game just feels right. Playing this with an authentic SNES pad and displaying on our CRT just feels proper and magical. But with this being the first time I've actually sat down and front to back beaten Donkey Kong Country, I understand why some people do not like this game. Let us be positive first. I still think the presentation of DKC is outstanding. The digitized 3D models, even with their fuzzy compression, still have a certain charm to them, and the backgrounds, also 3D renders but just flat screenshots of them, honestly look stunning. This era of kinda balloony, rubbery 3D rendering has become a touchstone. Look at that Render 96 mod for Super Mario 64. It takes the then aesthetic of the promotional renders and reskins the game in that style. But here is DKC doing so as a contemporary product. I think it's beautiful. I think it looks excellent. It puts the game in a time and a place that has only benefited it as the years roll by. It also totally helps that the game runs at a buttery smooth high frame rate too. This shit was chunky Stuttersville, it would have died on the vine. It's not just the graphics though. DKC sounds like a dream. I'll be honest, it still kinda feels like the SNES shouldn't be able to sound this good. I don't know what sort of end-level SNES magic Rare was cooking with, but the instruments being used sound so clear and real. I'm not hearing MIDI facsimiles of a stand-up bass or clarinet. It feels like I'm hearing the real instruments themselves. And obviously the music itself is amazing. I don't need to play aquatic ambiance or anything. I have the analytics for this channel. I know all y'all are around my age and we already have that song stuck in our DNA. You don't need me to put up the music art for this fucking Donkey Kong Country soundtrack. But all of this gushing aside, playing the entirety of this game instead of just farting around on a friend's console kinda wore away some of the magic. The first half of this game is a beautiful flow state platformer. The movements of the Kongs and the layouts of the levels almost put you in a trance-like state. The only thing that breaks you out of that state is your gamer senses telling you to hunt for secrets. You feel that tingle, that something might be hidden just off screen. Oftentimes it is, and it's very rewarding to feel in lockstep with the designers. All of that goes away the second you hit Gorilla Glacier. Gorilla Glacier onward, a switch is flipped. This isn't a slow ramp of difficulty that culminates at Gorilla Glacier. This is a binary state that gets activated the second your knuckles touch that fucking frictionless ice. The game suddenly becomes fucking hard. Not like fun hard, but frustrating hard. Levels go on a little too long, challenges become a little too difficult, and the design starts to incorporate more bullshit. Every once in a while, there would be something that kinda trolled me, and I would have to chuckle and admit the game got me good. But mostly, it was me in my basement yelling, "God damn it," louder than I would like to admit. There's a couple times where it feels like you need to die to something to figure it out, and the bad feels from that are immense. And the thing that really exacerbates this is the funky save system. Once you are in a world, you can only leave that world to backtrack if you find Funky Kong. The only way to save the game is to find Candy Kong. This leaves you with stretches of brutal levels where you get 3 levels deep and lose all your lives. You have to go back to your last save, which could be 3 levels and sometimes a boss battle to go. Granted, I'm bringing nothing new to the table by saying these boss battles are about as worthless as possible, but fighting against these dick stomper levels and then having that progress reversed pushes the needle past challenging and into frustrating more often than not. Obviously, this isn't impossible. I still beat the game start to finish in one sitting, but it does paint the picture of what I said earlier. I understand why some people do not like this game. On the system that Super Mario World built, Donkey Kong Country doesn't exactly pair up as well. It's a snappy platformer built with secret hunting and some gorgeous presentation, but likely to many, not to the degree Super Mario World was. I think there's this friction to kind of how obvious the speed tech of this game is. You can accidentally do extended rolls without meaning to, and the game openly wants you to roll off ledges into jumps to grab some items. That's fine. Good, actually, but there were a number of deaths from reining in and out of control extended roll that I didn't mean to fire off, where I had to remember that speed tech can also be a weird glitch that affects casual level play. Sometimes it feels less like I'm platforming and more like I'm controlling a bucking bronco because the game needs me to go fast, but you don't want to accidentally go too fast now. But even after 40 plus audible god damn it's, I can't bring myself to dislike this game. Maybe it is so inextricably tied to my youth that I can't divorce myself from its aesthetics. Maybe playing it when I was 6 years old in my neighbor's house was just too formative of a time for me. But I just remember it fondly. And not just like from the past, but from this playthrough we are talking about. Sure, half of the game was closer to horse apples than I want to admit, but in the days and the weeks after beating it, I remember the charm just as much or sometimes even more than the really dodgy back half of the levels. That's the mark of a good game for me. What does my brain choose to remember after it's done and behind me? If you don't like this game, buddy, I totally understand it. But I think I do, and it's probably not the last time I'm gonna play it. In some ways, FTL is the perfect game for me. A lot of my leisure time is spent on the couch with my wife, rubbing either her legs or feet as we sit together after dinner. Because one hand is dedicated to wife duty, the amount of video games I can play is pretty low. I need a game that can be played with one hand, can be paused at any time, and doesn't move too fast. FTL checks all of those boxes. Now, I actually played this way back on release, but due to wife life, I was thinking about how perfect it would be to play it again. After all, the reason I stopped playing it years ago is because I was ramming my head against a wall. FTL is a spacefaring roguelike where you need to cross the galaxies to get to the end and defeat the evil Federation. And with that, I must say, good fucking luck, hotshot. It's not that traveling through space is hard in and of itself, but there's a push and pull of two things making your journey difficult. The forces and events you encounter along the way will wear you down bit by bit, and you need to be constantly improving your ship to fight bigger and badder opposition. Survival is not enough. You need to be constantly winning and evolving. There are so many angles to how your ship operates. Gotta have someone piloting the bird. Better make sure the weapons room is manned for faster reload times. Ah fuck, that laser started a fire. Better seal it off and open the airlocks to drain the oxygen to put out the fire. Jesus Christ, that attack knocked out only 1 bar of power to our drone room, but that was enough to take our drones offline because they need 2 bars of power to operate. So much of this game is putting out fires, sometimes literally, or building metaphorical fire resistance. But that's the fun. It happens at the perfect pace where you can feel the tension of things starting to get out of control, but because you can always pause the action and give commands, you never feel fully overwhelmed by what's going on. It gives you the tools to stop, breathe, and keep on keeping on, then test your skills in actually paying attention enough to pause and take care of things. I love that balance because you both feel in control and spiraling out of it, but never an extreme of either that would tank the game into outright stress. Oftentimes when I lose a run, it's because either myself or the ship I've been worn down long enough over time and my destruction seemingly comes out of nowhere. You can only heal normally at shops, so you stop paying attention to the health bar as much because you can't really interact with it most of the time. And despite that tension I described, that constant attempt to maintain your grip on the situation, the presentation of FTL makes the game a calming experience. There's nothing bombastic about the displays of combat. It's almost mechanical. Lasers don't have huge flaring lights to them. Missiles don't explode with concussive sound. There is a deliberate muting of the elements to help you examine what's happening in the wireframe instead of being wrapped up in the fantasy of a rebel ship dodging and weaving enemy fire. This translates to the soundtrack as well. There are some more action-y songs, but the majority of the music has this pensive and atmospheric soundscape of deep space. Every time the main theme of Star Cruise kicks in, you feel it. You feel so small, so alone, so peaceful. Like you are just a simple part of this infinite expanse, and that's okay. For a game so difficult, it's impressive that it can be this relaxing. Because as noted earlier, this game is fucking bonkers difficult. It is maybe just a bit too difficult on normal difficulty. Now, there isn't easy, and I'm glad it exists, but it's not for me. Even if normal stomps my nuts a little more than I would like, I enjoy there being a challenge. I see it as accepting that I have not learned enough of the game yet, that I am missing some key strategy, and I need to keep playing and experimenting to see what my missing pieces are. However, this, for me, sometimes runs perpendicular to the roguelike parts of the game. If I get, say, 3 sectors deep and I have not upgraded my ship enough yet, I will just scrap the run. A lot of that does feel like luck, which makes it come off like I'm just delaying the inevitable if I don't reset. I've never had an experience where I was able to survive 4 sectors in and get lucky enough to power scale my way back into the game. If you aren't winning by then, you are most definitely losing. It's also maybe a bit of a bummer that you only start with 2 ship types and you have to beat the game to unlock more. Again, a feat that is fucking Herculean, but I'm going to be charitable enough to chalk that one under, hey, more replay value for me. Even if the majority of my runs go nowhere, if beating the Federation has a higher chance of happening in my dreams than in the game, FTL shines because it is structured and paced in a way that perfectly fits what I want out of a video game in my life right now. I love it. I spent a lot of time playing it this year, and when I grow tired of it, I will try to find something similar to what it was doing to replace it with. I told myself I would never play Slay the Spire. I don't need a deck building roguelike to take over my life. My local fighting game group has a channel for people who play hellacious amounts of Slay the Spire, and while I go in there to check on them on occasion, usually just to make sure they're fed and watered, I was fine staying at arm's distance. So of course they had to make a Slay the Spire game with my favorite anime girl as the main character. I am not immune to propaganda. Yes, Yohane Slay the Spire, which is what I'm calling it because I ain't saying all that, is literally Slay the Spire with a fresh coat of paint over it. My beautiful, darling Fail daughter card battles her way through random maps of encounters in hopes to battle and save the evil versions of her. Wait, I'm getting a note from my producer. Do not assume everyone is familiar with Yohane. Well, I mean, that's on fucking them. Yoshiko Tsushima is one of the characters in the second Love Live anime, Love Live Sunshine, aka the good one. She is a first-year student who has a persona named Yohane, the fallen angel, an angel who God cast from the heavens and took on a human body. That's correct. She is a completely delulu, chuny cringe teenager, and without a doubt, the star of the show. Yohane steals every scene she is in. She's such a wild confluence of misplaced confidence and brazen delusion that it is impossible not to fall in love with her. In case you thought the idolism in my name was just a bit, I actually like idol anime a normal amount, and Yohane is my favorite idol by a country mile. I don't own a whole lot of anime merch, but what I do own is Yohane themed, and my own idol persona was modeled after her rock punk outfit. Because my tits are fat and my taste is objectively correct, as if it's my fault, Yohane was granted a spin-off in the form of a fantasy alternative universe called Yohane the Parhelion. This includes an anime adaptation and video games plural. Just for context, there are 9 main girls in Love Live Sunshine, and no one else has fucking video games with an S on the end. Yohane isn't even the main character. That would be Chika. She's just that stupidly popular. So, back to the game. This is literally Slay the Spire with the Yohane the Parhelion cast. Yohane comes into ownership of a magic mirror that has stricken her friends ill, and she has to warp inside to the mirror world where magic is real and card battle her way through it to save her chums. Outside of everything featuring the visages of the Aqua's idol group, there isn't anything inherently Love Live about this. So, let's talk about the game. Yohane Slay the Spire is a roguelike deck builder with meta progression. That means A, the game is going to be random every time. B, the system mechanics by which you play the game are done with a deck building system where you gain and use a variety of cards to defeat enemies. And C, both successes and failures will loop back to the game in a way that permanently makes you stronger or more capable as you go on. You do runs of the game, sometimes you make story progress, always you get progress points that allow you to boost Yohane's max HP or attack power, or give her new outfits that change her starting loadout slightly. And, that's kind of it. It's hard to explain just exactly what's so gripping about these types of games without sitting you down and saying, go. It's one thing that the presentation is top-notch. Yohane and all of the rest of Aqua's look stunning and animate beautifully, but it all boils down to the thrill of starting a run and seeing how you can snap the game over your knee while it tries to do the same to you. The beginning of every run is rough. You only have access to the most absolute basic in terms of verbs. A couple of attacks and a couple shields. The way battles work out is that you trade turns with your opponents. Most effects only last for a turn, so it becomes about trying to set up everything efficiently. Stacking a bunch of shield on a turn your opponent isn't attacking doesn't make sense, because that shield isn't going to hold over to the next turn. Likewise, debuffing the enemy's defense will get you nowhere if you aren't going to spend the rest of that turn attacking while they have their guard down. It's going back up at the end of the turn. As the run progresses and you gain more cards with cooler abilities and charms with powerful effects, the fun of Yohane Slay the Spire becomes optimizing. Squeezing every little piece of damage or shielding out of your hands is intoxicating. It makes you feel like a brain genius. You start understanding how cards play with each other, how some cards help you build for the next turn, how to take the systems in front of you and overload it with charms and cards to make you feel like you are breaking the mechanics. When you get the battle where you turn one all of your opponents with the most perfect set of plays, it feels like the SAT test cowers in fear when you enter the room. At a certain point, the challenge becomes equal parts the enemy in front of you and balancing all the things you need to remember. When you have fucking 15 charms and 3 summons active, there are a laundry list of effects to consider and plan around before you even rip a card from your hands. And because the challenge keeps ramping, you worry more and more about the misplay, doing something in the wrong order, or not thinking about a charm effect, or not considering a looming status debuff. In this sense, failure in Yohane Slay the Spire feels less like the game being unfair and brutal, and more like a personal failing because you have been given such strength, but your peanut brain can only hold so many things at once. In short, it's intoxicating. But if I'm being honest, once I was able to do a full run clear, I was pretty done with the game. I did a second clear just to say so, and it was still enjoyable to play, but there wasn't much of a motivation to keep going other than some unlocks and challenges. That grip really wasn't there anymore. And honestly, that's fine. I had a great time with the game. I got what the story and game said was the ending, and now I can move on to something else. Maybe it didn't have the rabid addiction I was expecting, but I would still highly recommend it. Holy shit, that gave her Alucard's run animation. Look, I said there were multiple Yohane games. Obviously, I was gonna play them both. Everything's so cool in Yohane the Parhelion world, until one day a massive dungeon rises from the ocean or something, and all the Rabu Raibus are trapped inside. And that's all the story we got. Hop to it, Yohane. Yohane Metroidvania, as we are going to call it henceforth, is a pretty by-the-numbers post-Symphony of the Night Metroidvania. Not that I think that's a bad thing. More so, it should inform you that this is a 2D action platformer with multiple areas that require backtracking through as you unlock more verbs you can use to interact with the game. And to that end, I think it is a perfectly fine expression of that post-Symphony of the Night style. Your main attack is summoning Lilaps to perform a swipe. It comes out fast, has a good hitbox, and is the main tool throughout the game. As you save more of the Aqua's cast, you can swap Lilaps out for a member and have them perform their action as both an attack and an interaction verb. For example, Kanon's attack is her and Tonosama doing a big fat body slam that hits for big damage, and will break certain platforms. However, because these take meter, mostly have substantial startup times, and replace your basic attack, I don't know if I like using them for combat. They feel like tools first and combat tricks as a distant second. If you find the special item for each character, you can upgrade them to have a second, separate, more powerful attack, but this still costs meter and they replace your basic attack. I really can't get past this. Whatever value these add for attacking is immediately taken away by having an expense in using and having a value expense in not having your free attack. It's a really huge bummer because they all seem cool, but I very rarely have a situation to trade out Lilaps to use one, and it just feels like a waste. Thankfully, you have something else at hand too. Instead of Aqua summons, your secondary attack is a summoned weapon. This feels immensely Castlevania-y, right down to the axe having a very familiar heft and arc. There are a large variety of summoned weapons, but you don't find them lying around. You have to craft them. This is fine, I think. Enemies don't give experience when defeated. Instead, they drop yen, which you can spend back at base to purchase healing consumables, or crafting materials. You upgrade yourself by adding better accessories and summoned weapons. I'm not totally in love with this system, but I don't think it's like bad or anything, and I understand not wanting to just be Symphony of the Night's EXP system. The biggest issue I have with this is that it affects the item economy with chests. So when you look at the map for places to backtrack to, the room will show a little chest in the corner if there's one still waiting for you to find. All chests are not created equally. Sometimes these chests could lead to relevant upgrades like character items or new abilities. Sometimes they are just crafting materials. Assumedly, these are good crafting materials, but their lack of immediate impact makes them feel more like coal in your stocking than a present under the tree. I was gonna say getting socks for Christmas, but I'm in my 30s and that's a gift that rules and is immediately useful. This item economy might be the biggest hindrance to Yohane Metroidvania. Without the feeling that what I'm backtracking for is a worthy item, it feels like I'm backtracking for unfun reasons. Instead of the excitement of exploration, I am getting the doldrums of perceived necessity. Also, the lack of an EXP system means that you never really feel like you are getting stronger. You have a lot of summon weapons to choose from and accessory pieces that can offer stat buffs or resistances, but that's kinda it. Your normal Lilaps attack will seem to do the same amount of damage the whole game. You'll never get to a new area and go, oh shit, I can't be here. I don't do enough damage yet. Instead, you can just pick the accessory and summoned weapon that you like best and never really look back. Yohane Metroidvania is fine. I don't really have that many nice things to say about it, so it's coming off worse sounding than it should, but it's really just fine. I'm writing this maybe halfway through the game or so. I didn't finish it by the end of the year, and I don't foresee this game doing something that's going to be radical enough to warrant me coming back here next year and talking about it. But I also don't foresee it pulling a move stupid enough to stop me from completing it. It's a perfectly serviceable Metroidvania that doesn't do anything that would make you drop the game, but doesn't do anything that really makes it stand out from the pack. The Yohane paint coat might be doing a lot of lifting here. For however positive or negative you want to take this as a description, it's fine. I think Imadoki no Vampire Bloody Bride is the perfect game to show just how amazing Doukyuusei is. That is wildly more backhanded than I want it to be. Bloody Bride is a lot of fun, but it's also just not able to do all the super magical things that Doukyuusei can. This isn't to say that this brings Bloody Bride down, but more that it props up Doukyuusei that much further up. Imadoki no Vampire Bloody Bride is a PS1 dating sim where you are a hot vampire prince approaching young adulthood and tasked to leave the devil world to go suck the blood of a woman in the human world. Two things, not just any blood will do. To complete your quest, you need to find a girl with the platinum aura, as only her blood will be powerful enough. And also, the woman must consent to having her blood sucked, meaning you need to Casanova your way into any potential neck action. As I have previously termed it, this is a real-ass stats and schedules dating sim. You call up girls to schedule dates and you spend free time pumping a variety of stats. What's interesting about Imadoki no Vampire is that isn't all you do. There is a very rudimentary 3-city area you can explore during both day and night cycles. During the day, exploring the city doesn't seem to yield very much outside of the chance to run into a skirt to chase, but during the night, this turns into a basic JRPG with random encounters. And when I say basic, I mean Dragon Quest I levels of one-on-one battles basic. This combat system gets a little nicer as the game goes on by having a fire, ice, lightning elemental system in play and some very helpful items, but it never becomes front and center. Which isn't bad, it exists to the degree I think the game accounted for. Outside of basic attacks, basic spells, and basic equipment, the only unique thing going on here is having one of your devils perform an attack in your stead. Fade, the vampiric prince, was not sent to the human world alone. Along for the ride are 5 devil servants that have different stat proficiencies. Again, these are very simple. Like, one has better fire magic, one has better ice magic, and one has better thunder magic. Your last devil, Nina, has a better report stat, which is what your devils can do outside of combat. During the night cycle, you can ask one of your devils to perform reconnaissance on the girl of your choosing. They will come back the next day with this kinda indiscernible stat chart. I'll be honest, I'm still not exactly sure how you read these arrows. I assume that for the long haul, these double up arrows were telling me that my stats were still too low, with absolutely no guides or manuals for this game due to it being a fan translation project. A very old and maybe not the best translation, I may add. It reads rather chunkily, and I had a crash because one date choice left a Japanese character in the script, and the game exploded when it saw it.
Post-production Jay here. This actually happened a second time, and with much worse issues. Unlike the example I just showed, that character only shows up if you choose the right option, like the right option for that date. That's what makes it crash. And so you can get around it by just picking like a less great option. Later on in Erika's dating route, because like dates are like hard sequential, so like you will do every date in the order the game chooses for you. So pretty late in that order, you get to one where it's actually just part of like the intro line to that date, and that hard crashes. That just like that makes the game freeze right there. You actually cannot continue to do day dates with Erika because of that issue, and that's kind of a problem for the game. Thankfully, at that point, I was able to do night dates with Erika, which there are less of, but you can still get affection that way, I assume. Who knows what these mechanics are? But just as a heads up, if you do play this, there are some issues, some actual bug problems with this game.
There are some parts of this game where I can't fully parse out. Like, when you go on dates with girls, it's not really apparent what that is doing. Like, it must be something relating to my affection rating with said girl, and there's always a 3-option choice that must have a good, neutral, or bad efficacy to them, but I'm not able to figure out what exactly these dates are affecting in a stats or game state sense. It's all moving numbers and values behind the scenes where I can't really see it. This nebulousness does kind of hinder the game. It's almost literally never apparent what you should be working towards. You can battle at night to get EXP and level up, netting you 10 stat points you can distribute as you like, but this always felt less effective than spending your nights manually raising your stats. I think there's only one stat that can be raised by nightly excursions, but again, what that stat does is a total mystery. Sure, you get money this way too, and sometimes you get moonberries, which level the stats of your devils, but there's this creeping feeling at times that you are doing something less efficient because the hunt for romance is spent grasping for guidance in the unknown. I wouldn't call the actual nuts and bolts mechanics bad, but just ungraceful and needing clarity. A clarity that just having an English instruction manual might help offset. But thankfully, this isn't what keeps Imadoki no Vampire engaging. That goes to the girls and scenarios. Fade being a vampire isn't just set dressing. It's something that almost takes the piss out of dating sims with how often it comes up. The first girl you meet, Sarah, comes from a religious background, and there's so many times where this comes into conflict with Fade being from the devil realm with comedic effects. Likewise, Erika is an absolute girl failure, nay, girl catastrophe, who spends time in the research club crafting up experiments that would kill a normal human when they backfire. But thank God she's testing them on an immortal vampire. I love Erika so much! The reason I have so much Erika footage is because she's easily my favorite. Regardless of vampiric relation, the choice of girls is top-notch. We've already mentioned Sarah, the innocent sweetheart of the school who lives/works at the church, and Erika, the mostly controlled explosive who flips back and forth between the smartest person in the room and the single dumbest. But there are 3 others. Anna is one second, I have to consult the TikTok kids for this one. Demure and mindful girl with a talent for the arts and a connection with animals. Lilica is a steely and mysterious woman who isn't as cold or unapproachable as she may seem. And finally, we have Karen, who teasingly calls us boy and it makes my pee-pee hard. Who is a haughty and seductive girl boss who has no problem being the biggest instigator of this side of the medal podium. Outside of the girls, there is a large cast of other classmates, teachers, demons, and vampire family members. There's even more that is done with this vampire premise that falls into spoilers, but believe me when I say that they were not resting on their laurels when working with this idea. So much so that the game begins to slowly develop a plot across the 3-year period, and while it's not something that's going to put an English major on their ass or anything, it becomes very impressive how much drama they were able to wring from this vampire concept. Case in point, you can gain additional EXP dumps by sucking the blood from non-plot critical girls. If you go skirt chasing and find someone, you can go on a date or 2, woo them, sometimes charm them with your vampire magic, and suck their blood. It seems that this works into the day-night cycle, as the Platinum Aura girls seemingly only accept day dates and the Common Blood girls seemingly only accept night dates, until they don't. I don't know, man. But regardless of if the girl is platinum aura or no, this game has got designs out the fucking wazoo. Every girl in this game, important, common, devil, you name it, has a sick design to them and some absolutely bomb ass outfits. Erica with the purple silk long sleeve high tie off while draping a taupe overshirt on her shoulders. Girl, I am forced to kneel in the presence of such a fit. You got that shit on. I wish I got footage of Lilika's skiing outfit because that shit was inspired. I think there is a type of gamer personality that would find Imadoki no Vampire Bloody Bride absolutely anxiety-inducing. The sheer lack of parsable feedback would make some people scream as they try to figure out how on earth to properly romance someone in this game. What stats does a character really like? How do you know what level they need to be at? How much affection is enough? But if you can cast all that from your mind and just try to enjoy the game and take it at its own pace, I think it's really special. The concept it plays with is so much fun. It's packed with great ideas and even greater characters. And while it's crusty and hard to read at times, I found it to be an absolute blast. This game would do wonders if it got a modern era Doukyuusei styled remake. The bones of what is here are so worthwhile. It just needs a lot of polishing and TLC to make it the game it could have been. That will never happen. So I'm glad that even as it stands, Imadoki no Vampire Bloody Bride is pretty darn good. I have only been wanting to play the Sakura Wars series for a decade or so, and I'm happy to report that this game absolutely slams. Like, this was made with J catnip. I am so in the bag for everything going on here. While never initially released in America, Sakura Wars was a killer app first-party release for the Sega Saturn that has gone on to be one of Sega's biggest IPs. We only got a couple of these games localized in America, so it's always passed us by just how large of a deal Sakura Wars is. You play as Ensign Ichiro Ogami, freshly assigned to be the captain of the secret Imperial Combat Troop Flower Division. However, in a bit of wordplay that would probably land way better if I knew more than 12 kanji, the Imperial Combat Troop is really the Imperial Combat Troupe, a collection of stage actors doing performances in their home base of the Grand Imperial Theater. They also, might suck? While Ogami trades in his dream of military success for punching tickets, he meets with the members of the troupe. The cover girl, Sakura Shinguji, who practically comes pre-attached with a crush on you. The dramatic actress, Sumire Kanzaki, who knows how hot she is and will levy that at any given moment. The cool and calculated Maria Tachibana, a part Russian woman who is the militaristic voice of reason and level-headedness. The literal child, Iris Chateaubriand, an energetic young girl of French descent if the name didn't give it away. And as the story continues, you will meet brainy inventor Koran Lee, a Chinese-born girl catastrophe who... Oh god, do I have a type? And tomboyish karateka Kana Kirishima, aka that girl with the gif of her pumping iron until her sleeves burst that people get really horned up over. While this game would still bang if it was just a dating sim and visual novel experience of taking care of theater operations, it turns out that the Flower Division was playing with their cards close to their chest. They are actually the pilots of secret steam-powered, spirit-activated armor suits called Kobo, and are engaged in a secret war with keeping the public safe from the evil forces of the Hive of Darkness. This is the last part of Sakura Wars' big cross-genre mixture, combining dating sim, visual novel, and tactical RPG into one game, and it does so beautifully. There is a lot of time spent hanging around the Grand Imperial Theater with the Flower Division, during which you'll get opportunities to respond to different girls. This is known as the Live Interactive Picture System, or LIPS. A pretty standard choice picker with one big difference. You have a time limit. This time limit isn't standard either. During some of the more intense scenes, you'll be given much less time to make a selection. Depending on how you answer, and letting the timer run out to give no answer is still an answer, members of the Flower Division will feel better or worse about you. While this is standard fare for a dating sim, this actually bleeds into the TRPG segments. Before the Flower Division heads off to battle, you can check the status of the girls, and how well you've done with lips choices will reflect in stat bonuses or decreases for the individual girls. These are sizable changes. If their mood is high enough, they will get extra movement spaces. But don't get too excited. We're not going to talk about combat just yet. I'm going to say something kind of stupid, so just follow me here. Sakura Wars is very anime. I mean, like, duh, look at it. But what I mean is that it's been given the structure and care to come off like a broadcast production anime show. The characters have all been designed by Kosuke Fujishima, mangaka behind Ah My Goddess and future character designer of all the Tales of games. You get a sort of transformation scene when the girls are called into action, and there's even a "next time on Sakura Wars" episode bumper after missions. It's typically reductive to call something like this anime, but there is a design to the flow of the game that is made to mimic a serialized television anime. Like, once you get a couple episodes deep, that's literally what they call them, you start to realize just how much this feels more like a show than a visual novel. There is an overarching plot to the game, but most episodes are written in the style of weekly TV. A character or characters center the chapter. There's a bespoke plot that begins and ends with the episode, and it builds to the climax where everyone has to hop in their mechs and fight bad guys. Important cutscenes are done with full art instead of sprites and backgrounds. Full art that looks like it came originally from an animated scene. It reads as a truncated version or maybe even an adaptation of a weekly show in all the best ways possible. None greater than Sakura Wars' opening theme.
Yes! This is fucking gas! Oh my god, this is everything I ever wanted!
愛の歌高らかに踊り出る戦士たち心まで鋼鉄に武装する乙女悪を蹴散らして正義を示すのだ走れ高速の帝国歌劇団うなれ衝撃の帝国歌劇団走れ高速の帝国歌劇団うなれ衝撃の帝国歌劇団
While obviously this song slams unceremoniously, it keeps showing up in the game as the motif to hinge all of the action on. The save menu bumpers between segments have the main melody. It will kick in during dramatic action sequences during the VN segments. It's fucking perfect, and every use of it is perfect too. The second those horns fire up, you're gonna be on your feet because evil has crossed the flower division for the last time. Again, super reductive to say something is like, you are playing an anime, but it uses all of the calling cards of weekly broadcast anime to make the presentation shine with all the sparkle that those TV shows bring. If there is one weaker link to Sakura Wars, it is the tactics RPG battles. Not that these are bad per se, but they are very obviously the third man on the totem pole in terms of importance. By volume, your time with this game will be doing visual novel and dating sim sequences and significantly less TRPGing in comparison. And that's okay, because the battles here are just a bit dry. Each character of the Flower Division has a different offensive specialty. Ogami, Sakura, and Kana are all different flavors of up-close fighters, while Maria, Iris, and Koran attack from distance with their guns, magic, and rockets respectively. Each character has a unique special attack that deals extra power, or can attack multiple targets, or works in an area of effect. These are given a bit more love in the production, and it's well worth it. The specials do a lot of the lifting to make the characters feel unique. It's the universal mechanics that make this system feel a little weird. Every character gets 2 actions per turn, meaning you can move, then attack, then move, or move and defend. While this is good, I think the issue with the combat system is that you have a rigid turn order. This makes for rough sledding when you are trying to get a character into position or put a certain combo on a healing pad when you don't have the ability to choose who goes first on your turn.
That feeling of tactical control is just a little looser than what I would want. Each Kobo also has 3 different types of defense. You can guard against attacks, rest to fill up your special gauge, or use one of your 2 heals on you or a friend. Not having a dedicated healer and instead everyone coming attached with 2 stocks of healing is strange, and maybe it would play better if it wasn't for Ogami's unique cover ability. Ogami has a 3rd action that he can take every turn. He can cover any of the other girls. He gets 8 uses of cover. The cover will only take a stock if that person gets attacked that turn. There is no range limitation on this cover. Successfully covering a girl will boost her affection, and Ogami takes all of the attack damage and negates it to 0. This is kinda busted. It makes it real easy to send some physical bruiser into the front lines, have Ogami cover them, and then just reap the rewards with absolutely 0 downside. When you combine this with the rigid turn order, every character having access to healing, and the stupendously powerful cover ability, I think it was right that this is the smallest slice of the game. The combat system is by no means bad. This doesn't bring the game down, nor is it unenjoyable, but it does feel a little sauceless and lacking when compared to everything else. But as a full product, Sakura Wars fucking rules. I was having the time of my fucking life playing this game. The conversations, scenarios, the minigames, the little map you explore to find cutscenes, everything with maybe the exception of the combat is exceptional. It is so clear how this was a killer app for the Saturn. I would have bought a system to play this, and I would have easily played it over and over to focus on each girl throughout different playthroughs. Sakura Wars is truly excellent, and I'm over the moon that having waited ages to finally play it, it didn't disappoint. From the second you boot up Sparkles and Gems, hell, from the second you look at the store page, there is this palpable visual identity. The early 3D art style that has a flair of kitsch that maybe isn't entirely the best way to describe it, but it has this sense of naivete that comes from those 90s early 3D rendering styles. It takes a lot of skill to make something seem purposefully rough, and I think to that end, Sparkles and Gems is beautiful.
Huh?
The underlying game, the thing you play with your hands, is mostly Breakout. It switches it up by almost having a bit of puzzle bobble DNA. You can knock large gatherings of the same gem all out at once if they're all touching. If I'm being honest, it's sometimes a little hard to see the direction your ball is going to head next after touching a large clump of gems, so the pace of play is much more frenetic than you might expect at first blush.
April Fools!
What did you do to my drink?
I
You what?
You fool! I have played you for the rube that you are! For once again, I have pulled the wool over your sunken eyes. This is more than just a paddleball game with a unique aesthetic, you cultureless hack! I have tricked you! For Sparkles and Gems is nothing more than yet another visual
Wow, another year where I don't declare the game of the year in the body of the video. Why, something like that has never happened before. Loath as I am to do the same gimmick I pulled last year with Final Fantasy IV, I simply must. You saw the size of that video. I fucking refuse to shut up about that game and how much I loved it. Final Fantasy VI is my game of the year in a landslide. And that's in a year of really good competition. Obviously, I won't go into why it wins. You have 3.5 hours to figure that out in your own time. But there is one thing I want to mention here that I didn't find room somehow there. When I look over all of my favorite games, I do get kind of worried that a lot of them come from a time where I was younger. Outside of Honey Pop, the games that I really truly felt something over all happened during various parts of my teens. There's this worry that maybe the reason I cling so closely to Skies of Arcadia and Jet Set Radio is because they were really amazing games that came along when my brain was the most moldable. I've heard talk about how you'll play a game at the age of 12 and it forms the rest of your personality. Final Fantasy VI is what finally broke that. I'm 34 of God's own years old, and after playing and making the video about FF6, I have never felt more certain that it's the second best game I've ever played. I kinda didn't know I could still obsess about something like this again. FF6 loomed large over my entire year, and every time I thought about it, I thought about starting it up again. It is truly one of the most mind-blowing games I've ever played, and maybe even more important than that, it reminded me that I'm not stagnating. I'm not going to fall victim into thinking nothing is ever going to beat what I played when I was 12, and that there is more beauty and excitement in gaming left for me to find. Final Fantasy VI is the game of the year 2024. Jesus Christ, what a game. That's my year in gaming, dog. Boy, I sure played a lot. Off top, let's get this out of the way. Spirit Swap has been delayed into 2025. While it's a very fun bit that every year I've been doing this wrap-up since the inception of this channel, Spirit Swap is supposed to come out and it keeps getting delayed, and therefore it keeps being the game I'm most looking forward to next year. It's nice that they are taking their time. The developers promote themselves as a no-crunch outfit. I am a patient man. One day I will get that game and hopefully enjoy it. But the big fish of next year, the game I am living and dying for, is City of the Wolves. I am losing my fucking mind over this. It looks insane. The original Garo is a neat game, but it's honestly got a lot of hogwash that makes it harder to enjoy playing than the reputation of its vintage might give off. In short, I'm excited for a Garo that isn't kinda busted stupid. Also, SNK has had a good run of banging title themes ever since KOF 14, and the title theme for City of the Wolves is, no shit, one of the best songs I've ever heard. I've listened to this snippet on repeat more times than I am comfortable mentioning. They better release this game with a single for charting. There better be a limited edition that comes with just this song on vinyl. I'm being entirely dead ass. I'm going to mention some other games that I have wishlisted, but please understand that just because I'm excited for something doesn't mean I'm going to get around to playing it. Still haven't nabbed Bomb Rush Cyberpunk for fuck's sake. This also isn't a guarantee that any of these are coming out next year. See Spirit Swap. Lovesick Darlings looks like a straight-up, no-nonsense romance visual novel with great presentation and, as far as the trailer shows, emotional piano music. Put all of that shit in my veins right the fuck now. It also takes place in Australia, and all the accents from the voice actors are Australian, so I dig the flair that brings, and maybe I'll learn something cool about the country in the process. This is top of the list for next year. It's supposed to be releasing Q4 2024, but there's no way it releases and I finish it before the production of this video, so it's on the slate for 2025. Keeping with visual novels, Stories from Seoul, The Gundog looks like a 1980s throwback mecha VN with an equal amount of love for poofy hair era anime designs and an understanding that VNs of that vintage are 45% fancy UI border by volume. As of right now, its release date is set for February 20th. Unbeatable was announced with a storm, being a story-heavy rhythm game with the most fucking jaw-dropping visuals around. Holy dick, this looks amazing. This is right up my alley, and I'm going to avoid learning anything more before it drops because I want all of it, and I want all of it right now. Currently set for a nebulous 2025 release date. Angeline era might be cracked. This looks like it has a top-down, single-screen, Zelda meets Ys, bump combat meets slash combat methodology to it that has me captivated. The way the store page hints at non-linear levels and secrets you have to hunt for has me really interested that this game is going to be something special and nothing like I've ever seen before. No specific date given, but a release in 2025 is to be expected. Finally, iCode, or AI Code, or iCode is what I'm keeping my eye on because it looks like it's trying to do something. It wants to be this big, fuck huge game with crazy boy action, and I'm not convinced it actually has any of that, but if it can make really beautiful worlds for me to run around in, I can be there. There is no release date on this. There's also a bunch of stuff that released this year that I'm really interested in trying out, like Sky Oceans, Wings for Hire, Parking Garage Rally Circuits, Mirage Feathers, and especially 1000 Resist. Please stick me in the hyperbolic time chamber so I can catch up on games. As far as the channel, you may have felt the winds blowing in this direction as the year rolled through, but I am significantly prioritizing the Final Fantasy Kinda series. These videos are a fucking bear to make, but it's easily my favorite stuff I've done, and I'm eternally grateful that the FF6 one took off like it did. I still have other videos waiting in the wings, but if I'm being honest, I've been running into writing blocks on the next two up, and it's been pretty frustrating trying to get these to come across the way I want. Hopefully you'll see them next year as the fill-in videos between big honkin' FF video releases. The only other thing to mention is that you may see gaming in the 2025 year split into a two-parter. If I'm staring down the barrel of another video this big because I played so much shit, I'll look to split it up into 6-month chunks. Anyways, that's it for this year. See you all on the other side.
Motherfuck!